Okay.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Okay. Alrighty. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission meeting for March 13th. I call this meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Riddlemeyer?
Here.
Chair Rowinski?
Here.
Commissioner Robbins?
I am here.
Commissioner Michael? Here. And Commissioner or Vice Chair Narita is absent and excused.
Okay, alrighty, thank you. Okay, everyone, we are excited to offer two ways to participate in tonight's meeting. One is in person and the other is remote. For those attending in person, please complete the yellow request to speak slip found at the back of the room, or the front of the room, I guess I would say, and please hand it to our clerk. If folks are participating virtually, there are two ways. The first is to click on the Zoom link found on the top of tonight's agenda. Use the raise your hand feature, and you will be called upon at the appropriate time. When called upon, please let us know who you are and provide your comments to the Commission. The other way to participate virtually is by phone. That is calling 408-638-0968. Once again, 408-638-0968. And enter conference ID number 84 53 51 43 20 and the number 5. Once again, 84 53 51 43 20 and the number 5, followed by entering the passcode 723051. That passcode 723051, and press the hash button. Press *9 to raise your hand, and press *6 to unmute yourself, and once again introduce yourself to the Commission, followed by your comments for us. These options for public comment will remain until I close the public comment period for a specific agenda item. We welcome speakers providing public comment, but speakers are recommended to focus their comments on items included in tonight's agenda. There are 4 agenda items available for public comment. One is the general public comment period for items not on the agenda, a review of the small cell appeals training to the commissioners, a review of the draft local roadway safety plan, and finally, an introduction to the North Central Completes Streets Plan. So those will be the 4 opportunities for the public to comment to the Commission tonight. In the event this meeting continues past 11 p.m., per city policy, the Commission will consider continuing any unheard agenda items past 11 p.m. And then the question is, do we continue after 11 p.m., or do we continue on a separate meeting? And once again, that will be done based on Commission feedback. An item not requiring public comment, and is our next agenda item, is the consent calendar. There is one item for the Commission to consider: the minutes from the regular Commission meeting for January 10th. Commissioners, any questions, comments related to the January meeting minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move approval.
I second.
Okay. Madam Clerk, roll call.
Commissioner Riddlemeyer?
Yes.
Chair Rowinski,
Yes.
Commissioner Robbins,
Aye.
Commissioner Michael.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, thank you. The next item on tonight's agenda is the general public comment section. This section allows the public to speak to the commission on items not appearing on tonight's agenda. And it's important to understand if a speaker fails to follow these rules, that is, for example, speaking about an item that is on the agenda, they may be warned that they're off topic and asked to continue their discussion at the proper agenda item. State law prevents the commission from acting on any matter not included on tonight's agenda. However, comments are welcomed, and staff in the commission will take them into consideration for future commission meetings. Madam Clerk, how many speakers do we have in total? In person? How many in person, folks?
7.
Okay, so we have 7 in person, and how about remote?
I don't see any hands.
Okay, and telephone?
No.
Okay, so we have 7 speakers. Okay, great. Why don't we give our 7 speakers 2 minutes each to come in and speak with us? And I want to make sure the clock is available for our speakers. Is it up on? Okay. All righty. Let me just mention, for all our speakers, there's going to be a timer that will be available for you. Cheryl, is our clock going to be? Okay, great. Okay, you're going to start this. Okay. So just regarding the timer, the speaker timer, in person, those speaking in person, the timer will be located on the large screen facing the audience. For those that are speaking, well, actually, we have no speakers through Zoom or through the phone at this point in time. So those in person, we should have a timer for you on the big screen. And who is our first speaker?
Lindsay Reich.
Okay. And Lindsay, this is for items, you're going to be speaking about items not on our agenda.
Yes, the first thing I was going to say is that this is a general comment about small cell wireless facilities and not related specifically to the training
Okay.
that's on the agenda. Okay, thank you. Given that the ordinance is now being revised and revisited, I would like to underscore the critical concerns regarding the fire risks associated with small cells that fire and utility consultant Susan Foster presented to your commission on January 11th. I understand that there were some technical difficulties that night, and I would like to reiterate some of her key points. Each cell tower is an electrical device. Cell towers and their related telecommunications equipment can cause devastating fires. Worse, these fires cannot be extinguished through conventional means. Except to protect the perimeter, firefighters can do nothing to extinguish the fire until the utility cuts the power, which can take up to 60 minutes. If any resident goes outside with a garden hose to try to put out a small cell fire, that resident will be electrocuted. Furthermore, it is crucial that each tower have a fall zone, which is especially concerning in an area prone to earthquakes. And ample space is critical due to the likelihood of falling debris. Cell towers should not be placed near homes, daycare centers, and schools for the simple reason that during a fire, people need time to escape. I have been a resident and property owner in San Mateo for 24 years. Never in a million years would I have purchased property near a cell tower. I learned last year that 2 small cell facilities have been installed within 500 feet of my residence. I am outraged by this violation of my home, health, comfort, safety, and peace of mind. I myself am mobility impaired, and I live on the 3rd floor of a building with many disabled residents. 10 years ago, my partner, who has a spinal cord injury and cannot walk downstairs without assistance, purchased property down the hall from me on the 3rd floor. We had a very serious conversation at the time, about the potential fire risk involved with him living on the 3rd floor of the building. We decided that since we are in a moderate fire risk zone, it was worth it so that we could live near each other.
Hi, Lindsay. Yeah, we
If
have a
one-
couple of seconds. Yeah.
If I saw that, but could I please have those last 3 seconds?
Yep, please.
Thank you. If one of these facilities catches on fire, he and I and so many others who cannot physically move quickly would be trapped in our homes. Please take hold of the powers granted to you in the TCA to do everything in your power to keep these towers away from our homes and schools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Oh. Hi, everyone. If we're supportive, let's wave hands. Okay. Okay, great. Actually, that looks better, too. Thank you. Okay, next speaker.
Kelsey Morris.
Elsie? Kelsey. Oh, Kelsey. Okay, and you're speaking about not related to the training?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Chair Owinski. This is a general comment, also a general comment about the small cell wireless facilities and not related specifically to the training, which is an item on the agenda. You have been misled by the telecom industry and that these wireless facilities are not the only way to bridge the digital divide. These hazardous towers are not the answer. There's a safer and more effective alternative. The unfettered build-out of cell towers promoted by the telecom industry is based on false narrative of streamlining wireless expressly for internet connectivity and closing the digital divide. This is dishonest messaging. Here's why. We have a cyber-secure, reliable, future-proof alternative with an unmatched speed and capacity, and that is fiber optic cable for every mile, including middle and the last, to finally solve the digital divide. Fiber does not present the same fire risks as wireless because fiber optic cables are made of materials that do not easily ignite and create a flame. In addition, fiber carries no electrical charge and is not a source of heat. Fiber optic is much safer and effective, an efficient way to deliver broadband internet to our community. We are pleased that the city attorney recently reached out to expert telecom attorney Ariel Strauss, but hope that you will do more than just gather a few tips. Our other expert telecom attorney, Andrew Campanelli, has explained many times that one fatal flaw in the ordinance can sink the whole ship. Fire and utility consultant and medical writer Susan Foster has said, I am concerned that Kramer is being brought in. I was part of the Encinitas ordinance. Jonathan Kramer's partner, Trip May, tried to get and succeeded partially some of the more protective measures that Ariel Strauss had put in place, removed from the ordinance minutes before it went to the Encinitas City Council for final vote. Why do they even need Kramer if they have Strauss? Ariel Strauss will never suggest something that could get San Mateo sued. Please do everything in your power to protect the well-being of residents in your community rather than uphold the business goals of an aggressive site developer. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, everyone. Our next speaker.
John Conley.
John, okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is not related to the training, but it is related to the 5G cell towers. I'm on 10th Avenue, 732 10th Avenue. I've been in the neighborhood for 6 years now, raising my two kids, my two girls, 6 and 3 years old. And I just want to stress that I am very, very concerned as a parent with two girls that will now be sleeping 25, 26, 27 feet from these massive cell units that were installed right outside the house. I've tried to understand the code, which says least intrusive means possible. And it's hard for me to understand what that means when they're putting these units within feet of kids' bedrooms. And if it's happening to me in our neighborhood, I can imagine it's happening across San Mateo. None of us know the impacts of this technology and what it will do and what it won't do. But it's just very concerning that they're putting these things directly outside of children's bedrooms. And I highly encourage you to remedy this and rethink the plan. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone. Okay, our next speaker.
Laura Wood.
Yeah. Laura? And thank you, everyone, for being attentive to our time. We really appreciate it. We have a very long meeting tonight. Okay, Laura.
This isn't regarding the training. I have attended a lot of city council meetings over the past few years. Some of the public concerns included the loss of native trees and the lack of a way to track that deforestation in San Mateo, the unsafe nature of our streets near our schools, the condition of our infrastructure to prevent flooding and lack of planning for climate change, and now the implementation of these cell towers within 25 feet of residents' homes. These towers are not fulfilling a need that is unmet, but they will reduce the sale price of these homes. Whatever income the city has reaped for these towers comes at a loss of the property value from its residents. A lot of these homes are in equity priority areas and house rich / cash poor areas, like myself. We must work as a team to protect the financial, environmental, and physical health of all San Mateans. We need stronger ordinances and clear communication to all of its residents regarding these towers in all languages, and training on how to appeal a permit and a longer appeal time for processing the permit. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your service.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. Okay, our next speaker.
Sandra Dillon.
Sandra? Okay.
Hello.
Hello there, Sandra.
Yes, thank you for listening tonight to everyone. I watched back last year when you just started with all of this and you were getting information from the staff on what this was all about. And the staff was getting information from Crown Castle and the telecom industry. So you really didn't have anything concrete to go on. You've been given so much information now tonight about the fact that we can go to fiber optics, which would be very safe, much safer for your community. You've been told about the damage that this radio frequencies can cause, close to children, very damaging. But I'm glad you're listening. I'm glad you're moving forward. I remember when I watched on Zoom when you started out, many of you didn't even know we were talking about broadband. You thought we were talking about cell phones. So I'm glad you're catching up, and I hope you continue to catch up, and I hope you listen to everybody. They've been giving you so much information. I hope you're taking the time to read and study this information, because this is really crucial. It's a matter of health and safety in our community. And I thank you for listening, and I hope you do the right thing and pull all those prior permits, those 200 permits that you've already approved, way before you had all of the information. So you should really look at that. You need to have a moratorium on those permits and stop them right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sandra. Next speaker.
Michael Dillon.
Let's see.
Name is Michael Dillon. Lived in San Mateo for a long time. I'd like to say that the towers are obviously very dangerous. I'd like to say that the town of Atherton and the town of Hillsborough, the city of San Carlos, and the city of Burlingame, they don't allow these. Why don't they allow these? That's what you want to know. Why? We know. We know that they're very dangerous, and these are for the people that live here. More dangerous than anything that we have going right now are these cell towers. And a lot of cell towers, the permits have already been given. I worked for cities, and I worked on the building departments, and I worked with permits. When a mistake is made, you have to stop it before it gets any worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Our next speaker.
Jim Jensen.
Jim? Okay.
I have some questions regarding the implementation process of 5G in our neighborhoods. I want these questions to go down on public record. One, why do we even need 5G? I haven't heard of any issues or complaints regarding our neighborhood's access to the internet. My internet speed is over a gigabit, which is way more than is needed for a household of 3 streaming high-definition TV and surfing the internet on multiple devices. 2, why didn't San Mateo make more of an effort to reach out to its residents to inform and train them on how to appeal this planned 5G incursion into our backyards before its implementation? I am very active and heard nothing about it until I saw a little barely legible notice on a light pole in my neighborhood. I did hear that we got a single postcard, but I don't recall ever seeing it. 3, are there areas in San Mateo that are, for whatever reason, exempt from having 5G cell towers placed in their neighborhood? If so, where and why? 4, have other cities in California successfully made changes to their laws to prevent placing these 5G small cell towers in their neighborhoods? If so, why can't we? 5, what can be done to help homeowners who lose a big chunk of their property value when a cell tower is installed adjacent to their property? 6, how will the city respond if they are sued by a resident or group of residents who claim to have cancer because of their exposure to 5G radiation? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Next speaker.
Diana Dominique.
Hi, my name's Diana Dominguez, and I'm here with my son and my daughter, Dario Dominguez and Grace. It was important for us to take advantage of these 2 minutes to express how important it is for the city to hear our views on what we think about these towers that are coming into our communities, right? So, you know, buying a home in San Mateo, it isn't cheap. So you buy a home, it's $2 million. You don't want to buy a home next to one of these towers and potentially get your family sick. Find out in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. So that can hurt property values. Those are things that we have to think about when we move if we want to stay within the city. We hope that you all follow like Hillsborough, who does not have these towers, and why does Hillsborough not have these towers in their community? Why? How did their city protect them? What steps did they talk to? What information did they look at? These are things that we hope, because you took these positions to, be in authority, protect us in the community, that you would look further into it. I'm not sure how experienced the staff is, how to handle applications, but I hope that we're looking deeper into making sure that there's some sort of structure and protection for us. And Daria, I want to ask you, what do you think about the towers that come into our community? What would you like from your city representatives?
We want to be safe and
Like protected?
protective.
Right, you want to feel safe. And what about you, Grace? How do you feel about those towers?
We want the BT towers to be away from us. We don't want the ENF because we don't want to connect your bedrooms because we can get ENF.
Okay, so you want them away from our house,
Yeah.
our bedrooms,
Yeah.
our streets? Just
Yeah.
put them somewhere further out
Yeah,
if they're needed, right?
It's phono, but
Industrial
we still
spots.
we still want to
out in farmland.
It's for the phone. Like, we They don't need it,
If
but
we have
live on
internet
the
now,
way.
everything's working fine. Why add more if we
Yeah.
don't know the unknowns?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for hearing us out.
Okay.
That's 2 minutes. Let's go.
All righty. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Grace. This is our final speaker. That is-
Vikesh?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Vikash Bhagwandhan. I am a cancer research scientist, and I have been working on various aspects of tumorigenesis pretty much my entire life, which has been about 30 years. I want to comment about something that's been overlooked and is emphasized by the telecom industry, which hasn't been taken into consideration by this commissioning body, and that is the non-thermal effects of 5G radiation, and that is critical. You need to emphasize, redirect your attention from thermal effects and focus on non-thermal effects. Have you ever sat in a sauna? Have you ever sat in a jacuzzi? Our cells are resilient to heat and thermal effects. We can withstand a tremendous amount of heat. But what we want to focus on, and what the 5G community wants to focus on, or the anti-5G community wants to focus on, is the non-thermal effects. These effects generate free radical production, reactive oxygen species. We know that things like hydrogen peroxide are released. And what does this do for you? Well, my graduate thesis was written on the dichotomy between aging and cancer. And what we know is that reactive oxygen species accelerates aging and can actually long-term lead to cancer. Now, ionizing irradiation is a completely different ballgame. We're not talking about that. That's a whole different thing, and that's what we want to stay away from. Engineers are not biologists or doctors. Keep that in mind. The FDA has funded many of these studies, so you can look them all up. The request for indemnification implies that we want to use our residents as guinea pigs, and that should not be happening. So keep in mind, indemnification does not protect anyone. When the information is provided to you, it's considered intentional negligence. We need to put in a relocation clause in the ordinance for protection from non-thermal effects of 5G.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Arena, I'm going to give you a minute. I would just like you to explain what's on your chart there.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, just so,
Absolutely. So
yeah,
this
explain
is
to the
just-
commission what's on your chart for a minute.
So
Yeah.
Dr. Henry Lai at the University of Washington has compiled, he's looked into thousands and thousands of research papers, and it shows that basically radio frequency research, who funds, does funding matter? When the industry is actually funding the research, it shows that there's 68% no harm and only 32% harmful effects. But when the non-industry, research done that's not funded by the industry, it shows that there's actually 70% harmful effect and the opposite, that there's 30% no effect. And then Lindsay, if you want.
And I wanted to say that this is not possible without corrupted science. So it's very important to understand that every time you hear the city manager or the city attorney say that, everything is complying with FCC standards, those standards are from 1996, and they only apply to thermal effects. So that is why Vikash just came up and talked about the non-thermal effects, because we're not protected from those.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any additional speakers?
2 online.
2 online? All right. We'll go for a minute on those. Yep.
So Gina Landis.
Gina?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Gina. Yeah, can you see the clock?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I wasn't prepared to speak, but I am so inspired by everyone who has gotten up to share your concerns, and I want to thank you for doing that. You're giving all of us the courage to speak up on this as well. I stand with all of you on this topic. I'm a concerned citizen, a homeowner, and a mother. These towers are going up everywhere in San Mateo and beyond, and it's just deeply disturbing that it's in developing communities that are being newly developed. It will affect property values. It will bring negative impacts to our communities and our future generation that is yet to be seen or understood. So the ask is just please be curious. What we tell our children is be curious, ask questions, have the fortitude to do that on our behalf. And hear us out because we are not going away. We need your help to take a stand on this topic in San Mateo and beyond. And if we don't do this now, our youth will be asking us why we didn't do more for them when we could have, and why we didn't do more to protect them. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Gina. You're getting lots of hands here. Oh, there we go. Yep, lots of hands. Okay. We mentioned we have one more remote speaker. Yep.
Max Montner.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes, Max. Can you see
Great,
the
thank you.
the timer?
Yep, I can.
Okay, go right ahead.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys taking public comment via internet, as I am commuting home right now from the Caltrain station by bike, and I'm listening to the whole public comment discussion. And I just urge folks who came out on the cell tower issue to stick around for the next few items, because I hear a lot of parallels as far as the children in the community. Our local roadway safety program and the police chief survey have a lot of the same public health issues and effects, and particularly compelling hearing the children talk about what they want and need, and hearing about property values. If you are concerned about property values, you're concerned about making our community more walkable, bikeable, and getting our kids healthy and out of cars. So I just wanted to urge folks who turned out to stick around for the next two items. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Max. And you too are getting hands. Okay, everyone. Seeing no more speakers, thank you. I really want to thank you for everybody. Your comments were very clear, concise. We stayed on time. And it helps us when you're clear and concise and focused to understand what you're saying. So very much appreciate that. I'm going to close out this agenda item. And that is, we will conclude the general public comment section and move to our next agenda item, which is a presentation on the small cell appeals training that the commissioners received from city staff in January. This agenda item is for informational purposes only. The commission will not be taking any motion, that's a fancy word for a vote, on this agenda item. It is purely informational. We'll begin with a presentation from Jason Hilaire, our senior engineer for the city. And Jason's presentation will be followed by comments from the public, of which, Irina, I believe that's your group's 15 minutes. Once all public comments have been heard on this agenda item, we'll bring the discussion back to the commission for final questions and comments. So on that note, Jason, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Jason Hilaire. I'm the Senior Engineer in the Public Works Department. This is the presentation that I gave to all the Commissioners regarding small cell appeals. This was created by Public Works.
Sorry, you need to screen share to the Zoom audience as well.
Sorry.
So this lets the people for you and on Zoom see it. And when you're done, just hit stop share.
No problem. Yes, the Public Works Department. Thanks. The Public Works Department and the City Attorney worked together to create this presentation. Here's the agenda for the presentation. It runs through the framework, the permit process, design standards, grounds for appeals, how the public hearing procedure is, and then resources and questions. Again, this is available on the meeting agenda packet for all the slides if you ever need them. Starting with the regulatory framework. So the FCC is the federal commission that created essentially the Telecommunications Act, which was adopted by Congress. And the big takeaways from that I want to point out is that municipalities cannot prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the provision of wireless services. Municipalities must adhere to the shot clock timeline, and then the FCC is the one that regulates RF emissions. And again, our design standards are related to small cells, not large towers like macro towers. With all that regulation, we were reserved time, place, and manner, and now time is essentially the application process within the shot clock. Place is our preferences and where to place the small cells. Manner would be the aesthetics, and construction means and methods. And within those frameworks, we still need to be aware that we don't want to be so strict on our standards that we have the effect of prohibiting provisions of wireless services. Onto the permitting process. Here's the overview of how it's reviewed, approved, and possibly appealed. So we start with the review, which is overseen by the permitting group. They review the wireless applications for compliance to our standards and ordinance. We make the recommendation to the director, who has the authority to do the approval or denial of the application. And then if anyone wants to appeal that decision from the director, then it moves on to the SIC. In the permit process, we look at up to 15 submittal package items that are included in an application. There are checklists that are involved and over 200 pages per application. So there is a large package that we do review for each wireless facility. Project plans is one of the big important ones that we want to talk about. It's where we get our engineering level details for the facility, placement means and methods, and engineering feasibility. Photo simulations is another thing that we look at. It's what gives us a visual representation of what the installation is supposed to look like in the perspective of the area. The RF compliance report is the other one that we look at. This is the report prepared by a licensed electrical engineer typically, and it presents where it falls under the FCC RF emissions limits. So on the left, I listed the occupational limit is created with a factor of safety of 10, factor of safety of 50 for the general population, and then typical RF emissions limit. And I'll talk about those factor of safeties on the next slide. But on the right is pretty much what we see in the RF compliance reports. You see the plan view of where these limits are, and then on the right you see a horizontal view. And now the blue portion is where it's within the occupational limit and not within the general population limit. And then the green, or anywhere outside of that, is actually in the general population limit. So on the note of RF emissions and where they came from the FCC, the reference point was 50 milliwatts per centimeter square, and that's where basically the human temperature change occurs. And so the occupational limit was set at a factor of safety of 50 of that, of 10 at 5 milliwatts centimeter squared. And so the general population limit is set at 1 milliwatt per centimeter squared. And where we see on our typical reports is that it's at the ground level, typical small cell emissions is around 0.01 to 0.03. All right, on to alternate sites analysis. So this is where the city has its chance to review, what are the alternate poles in the area that could be a better fit for what we believe to be least obtrusive. Here's an example where the application was received, and there was another location that was further away from a structure that we felt was more in line with least obtrusive. It was still an acceptable alternative in the eyes of that it doesn't have any PG&E regulation issues, GO95 issues, or other things like that that would rule out the pole. And so we had the applicant redesign for an alternate pole. And that's where the alternate sites analysis really comes into play. On to the design standards. There are three primary categories for the design standards. There's the site location, which defines pretty much the district preferences for facility siting, pole selection, which gives preference to what type of poles to use, and then the design standards, which is essentially the aesthetic standards. So site location, it is a preference list that basically, and this is exactly how it's written out, the manufacturing districts, transportation corridors are the most preferred preferred districts, and then of course, shoreline districts and residential districts are the least preferred. Again, these are just preferences. They are not any outright moratoriums. Pole selection is essentially use existing poles before you erect a new freestanding pole in a neighborhood, and that's pretty straightforward. And then the aesthetic standards is there's 23 defined aesthetic standards in our design standards. Of course, that is published on the city's website if you ever want to read all of them. And then with all those standards, we just want to remind that we don't want to make a standard that is so strict that it basically becomes effectively prohibitive by making many other options technically infeasible. Examples of that would be a city creating a standard where an antenna size cannot exceed 1 cubic foot. This is a volume limit, and then the industry doesn't make an antenna that fits that small, so they could claim prohibitive and affect prohibitive provision because essentially the technology is not there to meet our design criteria. And then another one would be a setback of, say, 100 feet from any residential property. However, the right-of-way width doesn't allow for 100 feet, or faces the curb to the property line is only 5 to 20 feet, so you, for that entire area, would basically be ruled out. Sorry. So regarding grounds for appeal, we pretty much will allow all appeals to move forward except for the ones based off RF emissions because we are preempted by FCC regulations on that. And then regarding the director's approval, there are basically 4 findings that the director needs to make in order for the approval to be made. And the first one is really the small cell ordinance for the city and the city's design standards and application requirements. The second one is all applicable federal, state, and local laws, rules and regulations. And then the third one is have they demonstrated that they are in compliance with the FCC regulations for RF emissions. And the fourth one is essentially just that the application is deemed complete. I wanted to point out the top 5 appeal reasons that we receive in appeals, and the first one, of course, is RF emissions. Then we've got aesthetic standards, location preference, gaps in coverage, property values, and then a bunch of other bases. The ones outlined in red here are the ones that are not criteria in our design standards, so I want to point those out. RF emissions is the first one. This one is the city is preempted on regulating small cell applications based on RF emissions. And so this is one that we do not have a design criteria or anything like that in, and we are basically preempted from regulating on it. Gaps in coverage, there is no bright line legally defining a significant gap in coverage. So a gap could vary from carrier to carrier. Carriers could define anything that is a gap that justifies their project, and it could be used for capacity or coverage. Again, this is not something that is a design criteria, so we basically have nothing to review it against, and yeah. Property values is the next one. The design standards also do not have a criteria on property values and do not consider it. There are no tangible studies or methods to prove that property values are affected, and we have no effective means of determining if property values would be affected by any application. All right, the public hearing procedure. For every appeal, this is how it makes its way to the commission. First, the appeal is received by staff. We review it to see what basically the basis actually is. Sometimes we'll reach out to the appellant to clarify their basis, and we'll write a summary with them. The second, when it comes back after they've confirmed it, then we review it with the legal staff to make sure that it's something that moves forward. And if it's invalid, then we would respond to the appellant, letting them know that their appeal is invalid. And cases of that would be, is the resident farther than 500 feet from the site? Muni code. Have they submitted outside the 5-day window? That's another Muni code. And then if it's related to RF emissions only, then that's another part, Muni code or FCC regulated. And then all the other valid grounds will move forward. We'll draft the AR, write the appellant's summary. We'll reach out to the permittee applicant for their response to all of the claims, and then we'll bring it to the public hearing at the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission. We'll present our recommendation and have the hearing there. And then a big reminder, we do have the shot clock, so appeal hearings also must fit within the shot clock. At the hearing, here's how a typical hearing procedure runs. The staff gives their presentation on our recommendation and the appeal and the permit. The appellant has their presentation. The applicant has an opportunity to make any rebuttal, and then public comment opens. The commission has their opportunity to do a Q&A after that. This is the time when commission should be focusing on the merits of the appeal. Does the appeal tie back to those 4 findings that we mentioned that the director needs to make, and the design standards criteria? And the last one is, does the city have the authority over what the appeal basis is? And then finally, the commission needs to make a decision, a motion to grant or deny the appeal. That decision is final per the mini code and does not go to city council. If an appeal is granted, the applicant can still reapply, or any other applicant can still reapply for that same location and make any modifications that they prefer. All right, so the commission's authority comes from this chapter. The commission shall review appeals de novo, with the appellant having the burden of proof to establish the basis for reversing the director's decision. Now, commissioners should be taking a fresh look at the appeals basis, only consider criteria within the ordinance and the standards, and the appellant is the one who has to prove that the standards or the ordinance have been violated. Again, the ordinance is where the authority is given. It defines the requirement of an application noticing and procedure for the appeals, and the design standards is where really you need to review against the criteria and if the basis has any merit against these design standards. And finally, some resources. Terms, small cells are basically not macro towers. They're ones that can fit on a street light or a wood utility pole. Some of them have freestanding poles. Conditional approval would be the approval from the director, and then there's a waiting period before you basically get the encroachment permit and making sure that there has not been an appeal of that permit. The shot clock is the FCC shot clock. It's the limit for when all approvals need to be either made or denied within the 60 or 90-day timeline. If the city fails to meet that timeline, then the applications all become deemed approved. Tolling is another term used when basically a review is paused or put on hold. Tolling happens when first the city can issue a notice of incomplete during our first review. That gives the applicant a chance to make any corrections. Or if the city and the applicant agree to toll in writing. And then a withdrawal or withdrawn is a term used when an applicant basically cancels their permit. It terminates that exact permit. Of course, that doesn't mean that they can't reapply and with changes or anything like that. It just means that that specific application is no longer in review or active. And here are some links to things like the city ordinance, design standards, and the TCA. That concludes. I can start the next presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. And once again, that was the presentation that was shared with the commission during our training in January. We're now going to go to public comment and Arena. Arena, are you going to be calling up the people who can come and speak, or how are you?
I speak for about 500 residents tonight, so all 500 can't be here with me, but at this point, I may have Lindsay mention a few things as they come up based on what we just heard. Dr. Vikash has changed.
Are you speaking? Yep. Are you speaking during this 15 minutes? Am I allowed to? Right, if it's about the training. No, okay. All right. Okay, so it will be Lindsay and Arena.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Madam
Great.
Chair, could you explain both to the public and to the commission as to what the process that's been agreed? Are we having one 15-minute presentation?
It looks like we are having.
Or are we having multiple
we have one
minutes after
we
that?
have
What?
one 15-minute presentation.
Okay.
And then and then we'll bring it back to the commission, final comments and questions, and then we'll close out this agenda item. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Is my time beginning?
Yep.
Just want to make sure.
Cheryl, can we? The clock.
Good evening, commissioners. Again, thank you for your time. The city of San Mateo is taking an erroneous and misguided approach to the idea of regulating these so-called small cell wireless facilities based on several false premises and false assumptions. In order to deal with this issue, we will use citations and clearly state plainly why this is wrong, as well as show the double standard in this thought process. This staff presentation that was just given and given to your commissioners in January is unjust towards the residents of San Mateo, whom you swore an oath to protect. We have worked relentlessly to help educate the city on the full extent of the city's rights. This presentation is an unwillingness to treat the residents as people with rights, refuses to answer our reasonable questions, ignores previously provided evidence, and gives advice that is misleading and inadequate. Cavalier disregard of the interests of equitable treatment of residents shows partiality and bias towards the telecom industry. Furthermore, it neglects to inform that the city has been relying solely on applicants' consultants. The entire process is a failure of management to monitor compliance and procedures. Please explain where there is a constitutional authority for the legislator to use a private foreign entity to allow the people to deal with their own business. So I already sent this in February when the last commissioner meeting was actually canceled, so you should have a copy of this, but I will continue. Nearly 200 permits were approved that are not compliant with the ordinance. The city has not verified the claims made by the applicants. It simply takes their word for it. The city, during various meetings and appeals, multiple times admitted it lacks the technical and legal knowledge to sufficiently and analyze the applications and appeals, yet the city refuses to hire its own independent consultant on the applicant's dime per the contract with the city to verify and provide expertise. It says the applicant or its successors shall fully comply with all conditions. This training needs a serious overhaul. Application attachments 10 and 11 require factual data, and if they don't provide them, then the application is incomplete. And none of the applications have met this requirement for the alternative site analysis. There's zero evidence, and what the applicant claims in those alternative sites, even Kramer himself said rarely only one site will ever work. And all we have are conclusatory statements with no verifiable facts to back them up. Next slide, please. And just one second. The FCC cannot dictate demands to the Ninth Circuit Court. In fact, you've received evidence from FCC attorney Scott Novak admitting that the two orders are not self-enforcing. They're merely preferences. Significant gap and least intrusive means are the law of the land. And not just antenna design, but the network design. It's least intrusive to maintain 5 to 10 locations on macro towers versus 200 locations in residential areas. Did anyone ask us what the least intrusive means thinks it should be? No, it's just being imposed on us with zero prior input. The industry loves to opine about coverage versus capacity because doing so often serves their business goals to overserve the public with excessive wireless signal to maximize their profits in violation of Title 47, Section 324. Next slide, please. 2019, T-Mobile versus San Francisco, the decision affirms the authority and policing powers of local governments per the California Constitution to regulate utilities. This important decision goes beyond just aesthetics. There's so much more that can be regulated, as other cities clearly do. The decision includes a discussion of what it means to incommode the public. Incommode is not just about travel. Uncommode is generating noise, cause negative health consequences, potential or real, create safety concerns. All these impacts could and do disturb public road or enjoyment. Next slide, please. The ordinance also requires applicants to obtain all other regulatory approvals. FCC requires NEPA. Oh, and I want to make sure that this was handed out just in case to the commissioners I asked. I thought that they were having this as well, but can they see the slides on their screens? Okay. Ordinance requires applicants to obtain all other regulatory approvals. FCC requires NEPA. We're not asking the city to implement. In order to be consistent with the climate goals and general city plan, the city must demand proof of compliance. Just saying it's not directly spelled out means that the director has the ability to expand the inquiry already within the ordinance that the applicants have, that the director has the ability to do so. We understand it might be awkward coming in now for him to request this, but it must be done, and you have our support. Next slide, please. The city must ensure the applicants have obtained all regulatory approvals per the encroachment permit requirements. All small cells require both the wireless and encroachment permits to construct. Fiber is literally going to the pole for the small cell. The wireless permit is the foundation of the encroachment permit. Moreover, the wireless permit determines the location. Just read the rule and it is spelled out. The city is allowing them to speculate on a future permit approval. How is this due process? This is predetermined approval, and then future appeal will just be for show. All applications have active FCC NEPA complaints. NEPA is required for every single tower. Thus, if Crown can't show the complaints have been resolved, their encroachment permits are void. Next slide, please. Staff must ensure that these applications are consistent with the municipal codes and general plan and not just one chapter. So far, it's been isolated. We can probably not spend too much time on this, but this is what it looks like, and there's a sign hidden in it showing the public how this might happen. In our residential zones, we don't have those poles that can actually cover with the signage. It causes extreme blight. Next slide, please. This is actually on the same street as the gentleman here with the daughters was saying. This is a street that we live on as well. This is on the left, the way they showed us, and this is what's reality. The pole was marketed as the model that would be going around. It's much uglier than what you see. The antennas are larger, way more spaces apart, cables are hideous, the power meter is hideous. This industrial equipment does not belong in residential areas, period. This ordinance and design guidelines requires accurate simulations. We were completely shocked to see the final installation. This cannot stand on our street. It must be taken down immediately. Next slide, please. The welding is terrible. They just spray painted the pole, and 2 of the adapters are already rusting. This was not accurately portrayed on the simulations. There's no way we can allow this to stand and litter 200 locations like this in residential areas. This is not improving anything in San Mateo. It's destroying our views. We have to walk by and see this blight. Next slide, please. Another problem is that sidewalks do not have photo simulations, even though the notices state that no ground level equipment will be installed. However, in the blueprint, it says that there will be a fiber vault on the sidewalk. We have only 5 days to parse through all of this information, and every day we're finding out more outrageous information. Next slide, please. So you're trying to tell us that the residents don't have any input on how the sidewalk in front of our homes is going to look like. What type of cover will they place? How long is this digging going to go on for? It's nothing but loud activity going on in San Mateo. Our quiet enjoyment has been ruined. We all feel like we're in a constant industrial city. Finally, 200 of these locations will dig into sidewalks, and this is supposed to be least intrusive? Why is this being split into 3 pieces? The only information given to residents is essentially the antenna. However, the activity is much, much more intrusive than that. None of the fiber encroachments are included. Why is that? This is clear as day. This should have been used for our appeals. We didn't have this information during that time. Next slide, please. This is the additional training that staff needs in order to be able to successfully argue and demand this type of information. To the left, you'll see Burlingame requires this information. Same state of California, same San Mateo County is requiring this significant gap in coverage. The applicants might be hesitant to give this to you, but they must. The city can hire an independent expert to review this information. You're saying there's no bright red line. These are literal bright red lines showing signal maps. Staff wasn't trained, unfortunately, neither were we, to request this necessary information. The next ordinance must define for itself what adequate coverage is, because applicants could say, well, we have 99% signal, we want 100, but that's unreasonable. 97%, for example, is perfectly reasonable. Even Kramer, that's his slide from Telecom Law Firm, he's showing the technical service objective. Why is San Mateo not demanding this and telling us hands are tied? Next slide, please. The appeals are definitely not fair. This partially is not your fault because you were working within the knowledge of the guidance you received. However, the city must be able to change some parameters and conditions within the ordinance and relieve the shot clock pressure. There's no way that 5 days is sufficient for anyone to make any sort of appeal. A lot of us work 9 to 5. I work 12-hour shifts in the hospital. We have family. We're coming out of a pandemic, taking care of sick family. Some of us have chronic illness. And yet we're supposed to become experts in 5 days when, respectfully, your commissioners are still, a year later almost, asking very good questions about this. It's taking a city over a year to get educated through the legal landscape. You cannot hold average residents to this insane standard, which is why you have to do right by the residents. We need the best possible ordinance to hold the industry accountable. Only approve truly necessary infrastructure, because we've not had any due process, and the city works for the residents, for their benefit. It does not work for the corporations. Why is no one scrutinizing their claims? Why is Encinitas and Carmel and Calabasas and Malibu and all of the other cities we've brought to your attention and sent you their ordinances, why are they protecting their residents? They don't have this. They don't have 200 towers. I think Hillsborough freaked out when it got 16 applications and there was a huge lawsuit and they got rid of them. 16, and we're freaking out over 200. Of course we are. The least intrusive means is the standard. Lindsay, if you wanted to say something, sorry. And then I'll say a quick thing. Leave me 1 minute, if you don't mind.
Is that the time? Is that?
Yeah, 10 minutes. So go
10 minutes remaining, or no? No, 10, we've had 10 minutes, okay.
Yeah, Lindsay, we have about 5 minutes left.
Thank you.
You can see the clock, right?
Yes, thank you. The most succinct way to explain the debate around electromagnetic fields is that the industry and the agencies that regulate them are working from an outdated playbook. The most sophisticated technology companies in the world are relying upon science from 50 years ago to justify product safety. The truth is that EMF research has evolved tremendously in the last 30 years. The old idea that radio frequency radiation is only harmful if it heats you is no longer scientifically valid. And Irina, do you want to grab the poster board again? I mean, we're rushing through a 1-minute explanation of this, but I'd like to take some time and really show this one more time here. So when the industry conducts the studies, you can see that 68% of the research shows no harmful effect. When you have non-industry studies, you see 70% harmful effect. I mean, this, as I said before, you cannot have these statistics without corrupted science. There are hundreds of quality studies that show biological effects at exposure levels similar to consumer technology. In fact, there are now at least 49 studies from scientists in multiple countries that show non-ionizing radio frequency damage to our DNA. This disconnect between what the regulatory agencies say is safe and what science increasingly shows has made its way to the courts. Sorry, I need to sit. And this is something that we have not perhaps emphasized enough, is in 2021, the US Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit ruled that the FCC is not doing its job. They are ignoring the negative studies showing biological effects and possibly endangering the public. This is why you need to bring in unbiased experts, because the FCC is a captured agency. This is why we feel, based on our attorney's recommendation, when you are presented with an FCC compliance report, it needs to be done under penalty of perjury. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I had a couple independent attorneys review this training and they were mortified. And these are people who have written protective ordinances. They took a look at this and they said, this is deeply disturbing to me. The commissioners need to get adequate training. Even if we get a beautiful new ordinance tomorrow, you have to have people who know how to uphold it. And he said, even our ordinance now is actually not that bad. It was just not upheld. And I just want to do one more comment here. The city approved permits without any alternative site analyses that included non-residential sites, which isn't a violation of the code. The code says the permit applicant has to evaluate more preferred sites, and Crown did not do so in their alternative site analysis, in clear violation of the code. City rubber-stamped faulty permits. And with all due respect, I'm not trying to single anyone out here, but the community of 500+ residents, we don't have a lot of trust in, especially one of the people here today who did hide somebody else's permit, canceled the permit, said we don't want to invite any more questions. Forgive me, but Jason, that is not transparency. And I would never go to a doctor who said, hey, let's hide this information. We don't want to have them ask any more questions. That's shameful and that's not acceptable for our community.
We have residents that are talking with realtors and moving out of the city of San Mateo. This proliferation of cell towers in our community, this is not improving. This is not improving our lives. And
yeah, and I want to say Crown claims it can't attach to Caltrans poles. Why is that? Other cities allow it. Why is no one scrutinizing their claims? Only our claims and demands are scrutinized. We pay taxes here. How is Caltrans avoiding preemption? You have people begging you not to put these steps from our homes. This is for broadband home internet. This is not for cell phone service. Please do the right thing.
And as Kelsey mentioned before, as Kelsey, hold it please, my last 30 seconds. As Kelsey Morris mentioned before, we don't have much confidence in a telecom law firm, Tripp May, who's a partner of Ariel Strauss. He worked on the Encinitas ordinance, and I just want to underscore what she said before. Minutes before the ordinance went to council, he tried to make some last-minute changes. So we would like, what happened in Encinitas was that Ariel Strauss and telecom law firm worked together. We would like Ariel Strauss to be intimately involved in this.
Please include the community in this next ordinance, and we really appreciate all of the time that you have spent listening to us. For everyone who met with us individually, that means the world to us. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. Cheryl, in the event the commissioners might want to refer to a slide from public comment or Jason's slide, that's possible to do during, because what we're going to do, we're going to pull the discussion back to the commission for final questions and comments. And if a commissioner has a question on a particular slide, be it Jason's or Arena's, we can do that. Okay. All right. Who would like to start? Commissioner Michael? Okay, Commissioner Robbins, please.
Never shy, so I'm always willing to start. Jason, I want to thank you for the presentation and for the training. And as somebody, I guess, Susan, you'd be the other person up here who was involved back when the original ordinance was done. I think it was good to have the refresher and the training. It was something I was familiar with, but I don't think our other commissioners had really had that opportunity. So that was very useful. I'm not going to give a lot of comments because this is really on the training, but at the same time, I would just ask staff to consider two things as they look at the new ordinance. And these are things I brought up years ago. One is I do want to look at, I think we should look seriously at other Bay Area cities and what they have done. A lot of stuff circulating about this city does and that city doesn't. And that doesn't really coincide with what I know from these other cities. But I think it's always good to not reinvent the wheel. And if somebody has done something better than us, we can learn from it. So I'd appreciate that. I also think having dug deep into this, one area where we indeed can spend a little more focus, I think, is on the bolstering the alternative sites analysis in a way to maybe push these applications away from more sensitive areas. As long as there are alternatives, I think that's something that's been a little more porous than it should have been. And lastly, I'd just say to the public, appreciate all the comments, appreciate the passion. I would direct you, though Kevin's going to slap me next time he sees me, you really need to go to the Congress. There's a lot here that's preempted, and, call Kevin Mullen or, Anna Eshu's on her way out, but her staff, they both have great staff who I would hope would listen to you. And that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Michaels.
Thank you. I too want to thank Jason. The training we got outside of this privately was really helpful. And thank you to the public. It's true, we have learned a lot from you. You have informed us, and we appreciate how organized and passionate you are about this. I agree with everything Cliff said, and also I have a couple questions. I was curious if you could clarify the plan to revisit the ordinance, if we have a timeline, and if we have any contractors ready to help, or what the process will be. Will there be an RFP, or just what are the next steps?
Thank you, Commissioner. You're speaking about the ordinance update and design standard update?
Yeah.
Right. So we already began that process. We have reached out to the public for input and the industry for input, and we have drafted some edits that we are sending to the city attorney, who has a consultant legal reviewer for that portion. We intend to bring an item in May for the commission to weigh in on certain updates to the standards.
The May item is going to be a study session with City Council, so we're in the process, as Jason said, of getting feedback from both public and the industry. We do plan to have another meeting with the community before the May 6th study session so that we can let the community know what issues we plan to bring to the council for their feedback on. And then after we get feedback from the council at the May meeting, then we'll be going forward with finalizing drafts of the updated ordinance and design standards. Those will come back to the commission, I believe, in June, Jason, and then theoretically back to the council if we can stay on that schedule in July for consideration. The ordinance is something that will require obviously an introduction and second reading, so it will take multiple meetings to get ordinance adopted, but that's the plan right now, is to try to fast track this as much as we can. But we're going to meet with council on May 6th for a study session, come back to the commission in June, and then back to the council theoretically in July.
Great, thank you. And will we be using any of the legal recommendations that the public has offered?
I mean, we're going to be working directly with City Attorney's Office. City Attorney's Office is working with Dr. Kramer. They've also, I know, sent out a letter to Ariel Strauss that the community mentioned to seek input from him on feedback that he's already provided. So we don't have any, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, we don't have any other consultants or anything that are working with us. It's mostly staff compiling the information that we've heard from the community, as well as things that we need to change to deal with some of the changes in the regulations related to batching requirements and things like that for batching permits that is allowed now. So it's us putting together all those pieces, working with the City Attorney's Office on how we incorporate those into the ordinance, into the design standards, and then bringing those forward.
Great, thank you. And I'm curious, do you know if we have any upcoming permits to evaluate that are anticipated or on the clock soon?
There are applications on the clock. There were 4 submitted 2 weeks ago.
And then my last question for now, at least, is I'm curious if you could also explain a bit, I think we talked about it in our meeting outside of this, but what happens once it's installed? Like, when does it actually get turned on, and when do these RF emissions start, or the 200 that we have already in San Mateo, are they operational? I took some notes, but I just wanted to clarify about, I understand there needs to be a condition for operational date, installation inspections, a post-installation compliance report. If you could just clarify that for all of us.
Right, so a complete installation would basically be a final on their encroachment permit, which is the permit for construction. That basically would tie their fiber backbone and their power service to the wireless facility, and that would allow them to basically power it up and operate it. After that operation happens, then they have 60 days to submit the post-installation certification, which does include a post-installation RF study, GIS files, as-built, and things like that. The deadline for them to install a facility after they get their wireless permit is 1 year. They can ask for extensions, but essentially, they have 1 year deadline to install after they have a wireless permit.
And has that occurred for all the ones that are installed in San Mateo?
For Crown Castle, there aren't any that are currently installed, but prior to, say, Crown Castle coming, there are AT&T antennas out there that are 4G canister types built by Modus.
In the previous wave of these sort of permits, but none. So are the 200 that are being referred to, are those from the previous wave, or those Crown Castle ones?
Those are Crown Castle.
And none of those are operational?
None yet.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So just to clarify, we do have some of the small cell facilities that have been installed, but there are cases like I think the one that's referenced on 10th Avenue where the fiber has not been installed, brought to that small cell facility yet, so that it requires both the antenna unit with the power, but then it also requires the fiber backbone that be connected to it. So it's a multi-step process, and so in some cases we have antennas that have been installed, but there's no fiber yet for them to connect to. So.
And then I was trying to write it quickly, but what did you say about a 1 year? They have 1 year to connect it?
All right. A standard condition in our wireless permit is they have 1 year to complete their installation. Otherwise, the permit becomes revoked.
And then once the permit is revoked, do they need to remove the wireless
Yes,
cell?
if they had partially constructed the facility, they do need to remove it. And then if they wanted to reinstall it, they would have to reapply.
Okay, so it could be that these cells sit there for a year without being operational.
It's
That
possible.
could happen.
It's possible within that timeline.
Okay. Thank you for now.
Commissioner Riddlemeyer?
Thank you, Jason, for your presentation, and thank you, public, for your comments these past several months, a year or so. The other commissioners have addressed most of my questions or comments, so thank you for that. If I'm hearing correctly, we're going forward with a new ordinance or exploring some sort of changes, right? And I definitely agree that, looking at what other cities in the Bay Area and beyond have done to get some lessons learned is a good idea. Actually, if we can go to Jason's slides, I'd like to maybe pull up the one talking about setbacks. I think there were 3, there was like a 1, 2, 3 on it.
I'm sorry, setbacks?
No. No. You just passed it, that one. I'm curious about setbacks. Why these numbers? Why are you why is it saying a setback of 100 feet? I know it's just a, for instance, an example, but why 100?
Yeah, this is purely a theoretical example presented, but the case is that if you were to have a 100-foot setback from a residential property, then that would rule out basically a lot of the areas, because between properties there is no 100 feet for the most part on residential neighborhoods. Like right-of-way widths between properties in the street is 50 to 60 feet typically. So if you had a setback that was 100, then it would be prohibitive because you couldn't install anywhere in those streets. If you had a setback, say, of 5 feet, then it's possible, because there are instances where the face of curb to the property line would be maybe 15 feet. And in that case, you could meet the setback.
Okay. Yeah, I just, I've heard several residents say, that one of these is like being placed, 25 feet from a bedroom window. And it just seems to me that if you look at one of our blocks, there are a lot of places where placement would not be 5 to 20 feet from a bedroom, for instance. There's driveways, garages, other things like that. And I'm just wondering if we included non-bedroom, places where people are, sleeping for 10 hours a night. If you looked at different places, if there's any way that setback could be reached, even in residential areas.
Well, the setback as a criteria can be written, or suggested or considered. Right now, we don't have a setback consideration. Right?
Okay. And I think it's on slide maybe right after this, or it's talking about the gap in coverage. Yeah.
Right. So this one is basically that the significant gap does not have a bright line legal definition. A gap can be defined varying from carrier to carrier, and it could be either capacity or coverage, but essentially there is no legal bright line definition.
Okay. I'd be really interested to see how other cities are handling the gap in coverage issue.
Yeah, currently our criteria does not ask for any significant gap proof. It just asks, is there a gap?
Okay. Thank you. That's it for me.
If I may, through the chair.
Please.
I think maybe I could just elaborate a little bit on some of the questions that you had. I think we looked at the 100 feet because we were hearing early on that we were being asked for a 100-foot setback from residences. And so I think we were trying to illustrate that if we were to implement 100-foot setbacks from residential structures, that in effect, it would be prohibitive from allowing the installation of the small cell sites in the residential neighborhoods because of the width of the streets and the size of the residential properties. And so I think that was partly why we used that as an example. And in our discussions with our attorneys, that's something that we're not able to do, is enact something like a setback, which would in effect be a prohibition of allowing the facility. And then in terms of looking at the alternate, like saying, don't put it by the bedroom, put it by the driveway, or put it by, like in another part of the block, that might entail them putting up like another pole. And so that was something that we looked at too. And so that's something that you could look at, but I would just say to keep that in mind when you're looking at alternative sites, is then do you end up with a proliferation of poles? So if there's a pole or a structure that's in one place on a block and you want to get it a little further away from, say, a window to a residence or something like that, do you then end up with another pole that's 10 or 15 feet away? And so that comes back to our alternate sites analysis, and we have heard loud and clear that we need to dig in deeper when it comes to looking at those alternate sites and to do ground truthing a little bit more maybe, and to go out there and really walk around and to get our carriers to look at them better and go deeper in their explanations. And I think we're going to go deeper when we look at our next iteration of our ordinance. And so maybe it's not about putting in more poles, but looking deeper at the other sites that are available. And we've heard that from these commissioners as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Lindsay and Arena. I do have a couple of questions and then some, and then looking forward. Regarding the training, which I'll echo my other commissioners, we actually found productive. You might feel otherwise. But I will share with you, we did inquire quite strongly about looking deeper into alternative sites analysis during our training. And so we heard that from you folks, and we have observed that ourselves personally. So we'll see where that goes on the next ordinance. Going back to the training, I have one question here, since it was about appeals training. So if the SIC, and this is for Jason, if the commission grants an appeal, can the applicant still reapply with changes? Do we restart the shot clock? Do we restart the whole process? How does that work if we grant an appeal?
Yes, Chair. If an appeal is granted, then essentially the director's decision is reversed. So if basically you would terminate the permit because the director's decision would be converted to denied. And that would basically make that entire application, that specific application, terminated. That does not mean that the applicant or any other wireless provider can come back and try to reapply for that same location with a different design to try to address the same issues that were brought up during the appeal. And there is no waiting period or anything like that.
Right, so the applicant can come back to the same location, has addressed the changes that were requested, and we start we do start a shot clock.
It would be treated as a whole new application.
A whole new application.
New shot clock. And yeah, they could come back, they may not come back, it's up to the applicant.
Right, it's up to the applicant, but the applicant came back and purportedly tried to address the changes. That's something we would have to consider, but we do start with essentially a new application at that point.
We treat it as completely new.
Okay, great, thank you. We do have an ordinance update coming forward, and I'm wondering, I'm just now going to look into the future off the training, because the future is going to be upon us very quickly. Matt, can you provide us, the commission, the public, Kind of with some milestones you talked about, I saw May 6th, a study session. I heard something about July, the revised ordinance. And once again, it will be a revision of the current ordinance. Now, how the depth of the revisions is one thing, but we're looking at it as a revision of our current ordinance. Can you provide everyone with some dates for folks and the commission?
Yeah,
May 6th?
Yeah, May 6th is our planned study session before the city council. We don't have a date set yet, but our commitment is to go back to the community in advance of that to let them know, here are all the things that we heard, here's the things that, we're bringing forward to the council for consideration. So that, we haven't set that date yet, but that's our intent, is to meet with that group. We'll come to the city council on May 6th, and our expectation is that there may be some policy type questions that we want feedback from the council on at that study session. We'll be presenting them, this is what we heard from the community. This is the items that we believe as staff need to be addressed to deal with some of these changes in the regulations, things that we may have identified, just improvements in our package of materials, but also things that we've heard from the industry that they would like to see changed. And so we'll bring forward to them, here's the things that we definitely think we can do. It's no issue. Here are the things that we think we can do that may be a little bit harder, and here may be the things that we need policy guidance from the council on. And then there may be I'm just making this up on the spot, but there may be a category of things that we just don't think we can do because we think that this is legally not allowed for the city to do that. So some buckets like that of things that we'll bring forward. There's a lot of items, obviously, that have been raised by both the community and in all these different conversations, as well as multiple, we look at all the emails and all the materials that are submitted to us. We take everything very seriously, that everything is submitted. We look at everything. And so there's a lot on our list of things that we have to look at. So we're going to do our best to bucket those when we bring it to the council so that they can digest things in digestible buckets. So then after we get, direction and guidance from the council at that study session, then our next step would be to bring something forward as a draft for consideration at the commission. So our goal is to bring that to the commission at the June meeting. And then assuming that we can keep things moving, if we run into real challenges, obviously the schedule may get delayed, but if we can keep things moving and don't have any serious issues, then we would expect to go back to the council in July for ordinance introduction. So we usually have, I think, one meeting in July and one meeting in August of the council. So it may be, that may be the time frame in terms of introduction of the ordinance, and then you have to have a second reading of the ordinance to adopt it at a subsequent meeting. So that's the general time frame of what we're shooting for. The tightest thing on our schedule right now is trying to hit the May 6th study session of getting everything together. So, but we're on track for that at this time. And I will say, like I said, we take everything that the community provides to us. We've met with the community members. We generated a list of, I think, 19 things that they brought forward that they wanted to see us look at in terms of the ordinance and the design standards. I think that we can probably accommodate, at least 2/3 of those without issue. Some of the things like completely exempting residential areas, I don't think we're going to be able to do. That's going to be an effective prohibition for a huge portion of the city, and so I don't think that we're going to be able to do some of those things. So I think that, we're doing our best to do everything that we can to address the issues that the community has raised within, our legal restrictions of what we can and can't do in this topic.
Sure. Okay, so thank you. So early May study session, and the date could change, everyone, but we're shooting early May, and then coming back, if that study session takes place and things fall into place, we're looking at a June commission meeting, and then I think it's important when we put an ordinance in place, we have 2 readings, and that requires two city council meetings, the first reading and then the second, and then I think there's a period of time after the second reading, if it is approved by council, that it then becomes an ordinance. I seem to recall.
I think it may be 30 days after the second
30
reading.
days, yes. Yeah, that's what I remember.
And there's a public noticing period in advance of introducing the ordinance. We're just going to have to make sure that we can hit all of those pieces to make it happen.
Right, we have a lot of deadlines. So tentatively, we could look at a revised ordinance sometime in the fall.
In terms of when it would take effect, yes.
Okay, all righty, great. Thank you. I have one more question, and I'd like to go to one of Arena's slides. If somebody can do this. And this is the slide with, in there it has a, it starts with, it has to do with sidewalks. If people just go back, next one. Okay. So, and we can't see the bottom of, I think the most important two items here. Thank you. So, when this work is done, Crown Castle is supposed to return that sidewalk back to its original condition. This does not look original condition. Now, it could be still temporary. I will share with everyone, we have a big problem with PG&E right now in my neighborhood with the gas lines. We're very appreciative of having new lateral and main gas lines, but our streets and sidewalks are a mess. Okay. And so, if a resident has an issue, who do they go to? The city, and then the city contacts Crown Castle?
Right. If the resident has an issue with construction out in the field, they can contact Public Works and we can send an inspector out there.
Right.
Judging from the photo, it looks like temporary cutback, which is a temporary patch before they do a concrete finish.
Right.
So if they had an issue with this one or they had questions about why it's like that, they could always contact Public Works. We'll direct them to the inspectors who can answer those type of questions.
Right. And who in Public Works would they go to?
Our main phone line can direct them to the Public Works inspectors.
Who? I'm sorry, who?
Our main phone line, the Public Works
phone line. Okay, and that's
line.
the 522-7300?
That's correct.
And they would ask for an inspector?
Yes, they can basically describe their issue and ask for an inspector.
Okay. Because this is important to return your streets and sidewalks to their original condition, ideally a little better, but at least equivalent. And then let's look at the next slide. And I'm not quite sure. I'm assuming the photo, Arena, the photo on the right is before, and then the photo on the left is after? Okay, so we got before on the right, my right, the audience's left, and okay, so we don't know the condition that this street is going. Is it the same street, same area? Oh, they're different streets, right? Because I see a fence here. Okay.
These are different streets, but the point is the same. This is what we're being left with at the end, and it doesn't seem like it's improving.
Right. Okay. So this is something we're going to have to figure out in our revised ordinance. I think we need to tighten that up a little bit, but we'll get there when we get there. Okay, that's all the questions Commission has on training. Once again, everyone, I think the Commission unanimously believes we did have a good training session, and your input did help. I know Ariel Strauss may differ otherwise, but we found it helpful, and we likewise have found all of your input helpful as well. I think we'll get a good solid ordinance. We'll look at what other cities are doing now. We'll look into Hillsborough and Atherton and why that's happening. Encinitas, okay, yep. Okay, yep, everyone, please, please, please. Okay, thank you. All righty, we're going to conclude this item, and thank you. We called requests.
15 minutes for the whole chunk, right?
Who has the, did we get another? Okay. Yes, no, actually we will, yeah. Come on up. Yep, we'll put the timer on. Yeah, no, I just can't figure out where the slip went. And it's important for us to, yep. Okay, Mary, you will have a minute.
That's great.
Yep, and I do remember you from,
My appeal.
yep.
Right.
My name's Mary Komatsu. I was part of the earlier wave. I had an application near my home. I did an appeal. My appeal was declined. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's so on point with everything you guys are talking about. Training issues all over the place. And what happened is, during the appeal, the Q&A, and I think you were leading that, was to Crown Castle, oh, are you putting in any backup systems or any kind of other extraneous devices around the area? Well, yes, they were. And they didn't really want to say how large they were. Jason, I think you remember. So when we pressed them, they said, oh yeah, well, yeah, it's 4 feet tall. And that's going to be at the end of our driveway, obscuring our view of the oncoming traffic, that is called a smart meter. And the reason it needs to be 4 feet tall, according to them, is because the proposed pole is on a median. So in the photo simulation they submitted, it is completely not there. I am happy to represent it to you. It was absent. So when my appeal was made, I didn't even know they wanted to do this. Our community did not get due process. And I want to be included in the new ordinance and protected by the new ordinance, not the old ordinance that had many lapses. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, everyone. We are going to wrap up this session. Thank you. And we're going to move to our next agenda item. Okay. Our next item for discussion is an update from staff related to the local roadway safety plan. It is a draft. This item is informational, for information only, and does not require the commission to make a motion or a vote. We'll begin with a presentation from Bethany Lopez, our city senior engineer, and Ashua Musaravi. Did I get that? Ashua?
I'll introduce our consultants in just a moment.
Okay. And Matt, are you Matt? Okay. Both from the consulting firm Kittleson and Associates. The presentation will be followed by questions from the commission for staff. Then we'll reach out to the public and bring the discussion back to the commission for final questions and comments. Okay, on that note, Bethany, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Is that okay on the Zoom side? Okay. All right, thank you, commissioners. My name is Bethany Lopez. I'm a senior engineer overseeing the traffic division for the city. With me tonight are our consultant team for this local roadway safety plan. Matt Broughton is one of our co-project managers, and Anusha Musunuru is online, and she is also one of our co-project managers. Let's see. So going ahead and starting, these are the questions that we will be asking to the commission at the end of the presentation. So as you'll hear in the presentation, one of the primary reasons to complete a local roadway safety plan is to qualify for grant funding. In these grant funding requirements, there are specific requirements that a project that's identified be a project that's recommended for identification is something that's been a safety issue identified through a safety plan. And the improvements that are recommended through that project must be identified through the state or FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, as qualified types of projects. And so when we're asking the questions about the systemic treatments, we're asking specifically for feedback about if the safety issues that are identified have commensurate types of systemic treatments, and again, those systemic treatments must be in alignment with the types of issues that are identified through the data. So the first question will be, are the systemic treatments appropriate for the safety trends and collision data that we've identified, as well as with the community feedback that we've received? And then if not, are there any other types of issues, safety issues specifically, that you'd like to see addressed within the systemic treatments? So you'll hear about both of those throughout the presentation, and we'll be looking for your feedback on those. So from here, I'll pass it over to Matt to give the rest of the presentation.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you. Good evening. I'm Matt Broughton with Kittleson Associates, Associate Planner with Kittleson. We'll walk through, again, we were here in July 2023 to give you an update as we were wrapping up our crash analysis and getting ready for the community engagement. And so tonight, we'll walk through what we've been doing since that point, talk through the elements of the plan that have been developed as a result of all of that input, including the vision and goals, the site-specific projects that were identified, the results of the community engagement efforts that we did, as well as Stephanie just mentioned, Bethany just mentioned the systemic projects identification and evaluation and implementation. So in terms of the overall project, as I just mentioned, in July, we were here to give an update as we were embarking on that community engagement. And since then, we've gone through all of the development of the strategies and projects and developed that draft LRSP with the target of taking that to council in the next couple months moving forward. So just to remind what a local roadway safety plan, and I will say LRSP, I apologize, but it's a comprehensive safety plan, and really the goal of that is to reduce crashes that are occurring on our roadway. And specifically with current best practice, a focus on fatal and serious injury crashes within the city. The plan uses the safe system approach, which is a federal highways and national best practice in terms of how we think about roadway safety. So looking at preventing fatal and serious injuries being the highest priority. We do not want anybody to die or have a life-changing injury on our streets, and so that is the highest priority. We also want to recognize in how we make changes to the roadway environment that we're designing for people to make mistakes. People make mistakes, and we want that system to account for that and allow for those mistakes to happen without resulting in serious harm. To help address that harm, looking at kinetic energy, so the faster objects are moving when they collide with each other, the more severe the outcome, and so we want to manage the kinetic energy of any crash event so that that is as low as possible. And then I think most importantly, the shared responsibility of recognizing we can't engineer our way out of all safety concerns of driver behavior and other elements play an equal role in that. And so it's a shared responsibility of everybody that is involved, both the engineering public works department, but also users of the roadway as well. And to, again, as the systemic part of this, move to proactive identification to help prevent crashes before they occur. So from a purpose perspective, really, again, emphasizing improving roadway safety for everyone in the city, regardless of how they're traveling, is the core focus of the plan. And helping to support and identify projects that can be implemented. So creating that implementation plan that is going to help provide eligibility to seek grant funding, like the Highway Safety Improvement Program or the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant programs, which are federal funds specifically for safety improvements. And this project was developed to meet all of the criteria. A local roadway safety plan is required to be eligible for those grant programs. And also to establish that vision and goals for how we want to achieve that. A key driver of this, so we shared this at the last presentation of crashes over the last 5 years. There was a drop with the pandemic, which we understand, but the key element that we'd want to draw attention to there in 2021 is that that share of fatal and severe injury crashes actually increased. And so that means that proportionally, there are more people dying or having life-changing injuries as a result of crashes on city roads. And so we want to make sure that we are working to eliminate that. So as part of that, establishing that vision statement of envisioning a roadway network that prioritizes safety for all users, ensuring secure travel throughout the city. The way that we implement that, 4 goals that were established of using a data-driven, community-informed priority locations, so helping to identify where the most frequent and severe crashes occurring throughout the city and identifying those locations to prioritize for improvements, and then working again to proactively address roadway safety. So looking for the opportunity to make improvements that are going to help prevent those crashes from occurring in the first place. We also want to collaborate with local agencies and safety partners on implementation. There are elements that are outside the city's control, and so collaborating with partners like Caltrans, for example, can help address some of the safety issues that exist within the city. And as I mentioned, with the shared responsibility of educating and promoting safe travel practices within the city. So recognizing that everyone, as they're traveling through the city, has a responsibility to help contribute to that safe environment that we want to create. And finally, from the monitoring and evaluation of creating that ongoing process so that the city can understand how safety is being addressed over time. So switching into kind of the project side of it, so types of countermeasures. Countermeasures is the term that we use to refer to engineering treatments that are implemented on the road to help address safety. There are 2 categories that we'll be talking about: site-specific projects, which I refer to as priority locations as well. So these are locations that have the highest frequency and severity of crashes. So it's locations where people have died or there have been a number of injuries that have occurred over the years. And so that is kind of the technical analysis component of that, and bringing in the community feedback to make sure that we're understanding what's happening at those sites to help inform the development of that project. On the systemic side, again, which we'll be looking to some input from you all tonight, those are locations where we are identifying elements of the roadway that are associated with increased crash risk. So we'll talk a little bit about what those are, but the collision trends generally citywide, we use those to then look back to the network to understand where improvements might be able to address some of those issues that we're seeing. And again, that was really what informed through that community feedback process of helping us understand what community members are seeing and help to fill in that gap where we all know that there are a number of near-miss events that occur every day that could result in a crash, and we don't see those in the crash data that we have, and so that community input is really valuable there. For the site-specific or priority locations, there's a top 10 locations, so 6 of those locations are signalized intersections throughout the city, 3 unsignalized intersections, and then the single corridor along Hillsdale between Saratoga Drive and Norfolk Street. So again, these are the locations that, based on crash frequency and severity, have the greatest opportunity for having the greatest benefit for addressing the concerns there. And these priority locations, the process that we go through is evaluating the crash trends that are specific to that site to identify the countermeasures that quantitatively are going to help address the types of crashes that are occurring there. This is an example of a project that the city implemented of a site that was identified as a high priority location. And then the image on the right there is showing the hardening of that intersection to prevent some of the movements that were associated with broadside crashes that were occurring at that location. And as a result of that project, since that implementation, there have not been any broadside crashes that have occurred at that location. Other types of improvements that we look to as we talk about walking or biking, that may be enhanced pedestrian crossings, like the image, the larger image there showing a rectangular rapid flashing beacon and high visibility crosswalk installed at a key crossing, or bicycle markings through the intersection to make clear that path of travel for bicyclists, for drivers to understand that potential conflict. And then in the bottom right image, just showing the opportunity to enhance signals equipment to clarify movements that might be made, add additional equipment, and enhance the visibility of those signals. Before we get into the systemic treatments, we did want to talk a little bit about the community engagement that occurred. There were 2 pop-ups that were held. We had a city website that included both a story map that explained generally what the local roadway safety plan was and walked through some of the key findings from the plan, as well as an online survey, and including the web map where the public could leave comments on where they felt safety concerns. In addition to that, and you may have seen these during the engagement process, there were A-frames that were set out at priority location neighborhoods throughout the city to help encourage that feedback. You can see an example of one of those, as well as doing social media engagement to help us make sure that we were reaching everyone that we could. As part of that reach, the project webpage had over 1,000 views. Additionally, the flyers that were posted throughout the city, the QR codes were scanned 500 times, which then provided them access to the project information. We also received a really great, a huge amount of comments on the interactive map of 500 individual comments throughout the city, which you can see there, and an additional 200 comments at the 2 pop-ups that were held in collaboration with the Complete Streets Plan at the San Mateo Central Park and the Farmers Market. So just to highlight some of the key themes that came out of that engagement process. So intersection design was something that came up quite frequently, of concerns or requests for additional stop signs, as well as concerns around visibility at intersections, of being able to see potential conflicts. Concerns around red light running and speeding on some of the major corridors within the city, and especially within school zones was something that was a frequent comment that was received. We received a number of a lot of feedback related to walking and biking, potential conflicts, and the lack of connectivity for the network, or lack of available crossings for people that are walking on some of the major arterials as well. And then finally, and I mentioned school zones. That was definitely a major concern, of making sure that there were safe walking and biking routes for children to school, but also addressing concerns around drop-off and pickup congestion and conflicts that arise at that. And then finally, with the pavement conditions, of concerns around potholes and other pavement maintenance issues throughout the city. So coming back to our main question to you all again, we want to talk a little bit about systemic trends and the recommended projects that we're hoping to move forward. When I say systemic, these are treatments that can be widely implemented across the city at a relatively low cost to help address high-risk roadway features, or help alleviate elements that may increase the potential for a more frequent or severe crash at a location. When we look at the crash data, this is showing the types of crashes over that 5-year period within the city. And when we focus in on fatal and serious injury crashes, 3 pop out. So the blue portion of the bar there are the people that were crashes where a death or a serious life-changing injury occurred. And the 3 that you see there, broadside, vehicle and pedestrian, and vehicle and bicyclist crashes, are responsible for 71% of all of the fatal and serious injury crashes within the city. So these 3 were identified as the high priority for those systemic improvements of the developing projects that are going to help prevent these crashes from occurring in the first place. Again, looking at that comparison between San Mateo and statewide data, this is comparing the percentages of those fatal and severe collision shares. Again, we see that we're consistent with the findings from the statewide safety plan, the strategic highway safety plan, with the 3 in red there representing the priorities for these systemic improvements, and then the 4 additional in yellow are the additional emphasis areas as part of the plan that we also want to make sure are being addressed through other means. And so again, just highlighting those percentage priorities there to give you a quick comparison where you can see the 3 in red exceeding the statewide average for those emphasis areas. When we talk about what the systemic treatments would be, the ones that have been identified as a result of the plan, and again, we're looking for your feedback of if these are appropriate or there are other opportunities that we should be exploring. Looking at leading pedestrian intervals and no right turn on red treatments at signalized intersections. The leading pedestrian interval gives essentially a head start to a pedestrian crossing of allowing that ped movement to begin before the corresponding vehicle movement would allow. And when married with a no right turn on red, that prevents a right turning vehicle from turning while that leading pedestrian interval is active for the pedestrian, so that that pedestrian can move forward and avoid that potential conflict with the right turning vehicle. We also recommending signal visibility improvements to help enhance, and you can see the image of the signal head there with the reflective taping so that it is more visible at night, and greater awareness of the upcoming potential conflicts at a signal. And then centerline hardening, which is the bottom right image that helps to ensure that left turning movements especially are taken more slowly and appropriately and are not veering out of the appropriate lane that they should be turning into. Additional systemic treatments of looking at speed management opportunities. This primarily consists of traffic calming, like the example here showing a raised crossing with curb extensions to narrow that roadway and encourage vehicles to travel at the appropriate speed along that corridor. And you can see the map on the right is showing those locations where we think this kind of speed management application would be most helpful. And then as we move forward with the plan, again, to wrap up here, updating the plan also provides guidance on how to track the progress that is being made over time of identifying the crash data to track annually to be able to move forward, revisiting that plan every 3 to 5 years, and then looking for those opportunities to address new issues as they may arise. And so finally, just to wrap up here of, again, targeting kind of in the late spring, early summer here of taking this to council for adoption after we receive your input and final revisions to the plan.
Thank you, Matt. So as we mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, the questions that we're going to be asking the commission this evening are the systemic treatments appropriate, measures for the type of trends and community feedback that we received, and then if not, are there any other types of issues you'd like to see addressed in the systemic treatments?
Okay. Thank you, Matt and Bethany. So we'll go to some Q&A from the commission. It would be a good idea to put your questions up, but for us. But my sense is we'll also have other questions that will help inform those 2 questions that you have presented to us. So, Commissioner Riddlemeyer, would you like to start? Sure. Yeah, let's get the questions up. No, we'll go public comment after this line of questions. We'll go to the public, and then we'll bring it back for final questions and comments from the commission. Okay.
Yes, thank you for this information. When I was reading your materials, it talked about collisions by ages. I just have a question about that. I don't know if you have that information in front of you. It mentioned, I think there was 54% of the collisions were ages 18 to 64, and 10% were ages 65 and up, I think. That's 64%.
Do you want to go to that slide?
Sorry, do you have a page number?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. It was.
Is it possible to
I don't
go
think
to
it was
the
in the
slide?
slides.
I don't think we have that particular data in the slides.
Oh, got it. All right.
Okay. Okay, we can skip that. I'll look for it when somebody else is asking a question. The definition of severe injury. Matt mentioned life-changing. I'm just wondering if you can expand on the how severe injury is defined.
Yep, certainly. So a severe or serious injury, or now suspected serious injury, is a loss of limb, a major break. It can be that you are paralyzed following the crash. So it is something where for an extended period of time that you are either recuperating from that or you will never recuperate from that injury. So it is not not a minor break or something like that, or my neck hurts. It's that something has happened to you that is going to impact your ability to carry out your life in the same way moving forward.
Okay, so it wouldn't include somebody who's, injured, maybe not loss of limb, but injured so that to the point where they lost their job, lost their home. It wouldn't include something like that.
Yeah, I think it could be possible, but at the time of the collision is when that definition is identified, when that type of collision is identified, and that's based on the officer's read of the injury. So those sorts of things are certainly things that may progress after the actual collision has occurred, and that's not something that we're tracking in the data.
Is there any way that could be tracked?
Yeah, there have been studies to understand the relationship between the officers reporting at the scene and a hospital admittance. It is complicated by HIPAA laws, so we can't access all of that information in exactly the same way. Generally, the findings of those studies are police officers are not doctors, and so internal injuries especially are not as well captured, and that currently in the way that the data is received to us, that's not always something there's no feedback loop between the doctor saying that it is actually a very serious injury, internal injury, to then have that come back into the crash report data. If somebody does pass away at the hospital following a crash, that is something that is captured in the data though. So.
Okay, thanks. And you did mention near misses being included in the, did you see that that's included in some of the community feedback?
Yeah, so that's part of one of the great benefits of the community engagement is that they can help us verify or identify additional locations that we may not see anything in the data. We didn't collect near miss data, but through the community feedback, we hear of the issues that are occurring at that site that are, typically outside of a crash actually occurring. And so that helps inform when we look at systemic treatments in particular of different priorities that we may establish based on the feedback that we're receiving of, we may not see that in the data, but it's something that could help inform the selection of a site to move forward for a priority or not.
All right. I'm curious because this is what you do, so I definitely look to you as more of a as an expert on this. Have you seen any innovative, I should say, ways to collect near-miss data on a more systematic way?
I have heard of such information, attempted to be collected, but I think that it's really something that's still very, very challenging. I think it's going to take a lot of self-reporting. And we do definitely get some of those reports. We get, requests from community members about different challenges that they've had at different locations, including things like near misses. But as far as something that's, like technology-based, that's widely available, currently there isn't something that I'm aware of that's on the market for us to, simply procure and try to analyze with.
I could add there are platforms that are available that are starting to process that information. It is still very much new ground, and it's something, especially on a citywide basis, that often is not the case. It's often taking a camera, putting it up, and monitoring a site for a specific period of time, and then being able to process that to understand if there were near-miss events that occurred while you had the camera out there. In terms of having a citywide application of that, that's going to be able to collect that data in real time over a longer period of time, which is what we would want for a citywide safety plan. That's currently kind of in the infancy, and something that the practice is moving towards that, but it's not yet at that point.
Okay, well, good to hear that. And last question for now is just how does this overlap with the Complete Streets Plan, and is there funding for any of these ideas that are in here? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll talk about the Complete Streets Plan, and then Matt, if you can answer about the funding opportunities. So certainly we did partner early on, especially with the Complete Streets Plan project team. So we are two distinct project teams, certainly. But we did share our data and our findings, especially a lot of the early on findings. We had that data, like we presented it to you last July. And so we were able to share that data with the Complete Streets team. That information has been incorporated into their analysis and process. And so there is definitely overlap between the two, where the Complete Streets Plan can consider some of the safety challenges that we've had in the city. So there definitely is coordination there.
And then in terms of the funding, the plan was developed specifically to allow the city to be eligible for funding. So the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which is administered, it's a federal funding that comes to Caltrans, they then administer a grant program every year-ish. And so the projects within this, especially the priority projects, that program is driven based on the crashes themselves. And so that's why we look at those priority locations that have the greatest potential for reducing frequency and severity of crashes, because they're going to be the projects that are going to be able to move under that program. There's also the Safe Streets and Roads for All federal program, which is administered by USDOT, Department of Transportation. And that program allows for less of a focus on crash frequency and severity, and so that's where those systemic improvements of being able to tie that to that overall citywide trend is something that those projects are definitely eligible under that program, as well as the overall capital improvements as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Robbins, questions?
Sure, not many. Thanks. I looked at the program, I think it was last July when we saw this in detail. And I'll be honest, I really think I would defer to staff as to what are appropriate systemic treatments as to efficacy and cost. I have some ideas, but I have absolutely no expertise in that. And I understand that the importance of the plan as a basis, necessary requirement for grant funding. What I'm really interested in, and maybe I'm gun jumping here, is status of these priority projects. I'm assuming they haven't moved forward because we don't have funding, or are some of them things that the city's been able to do just out of general funds and other projects?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because a handful of the top 10 priority locations we actually do already have CIP funding for to make improvements at these locations. And so it is projects that we're already in the process of moving forward with. I think that there was an element of that being coincidental. It wasn't necessarily driven by this plan, but I think that those are driven by locations that staff and council have identified as having the greatest need in the community for this types of project. And so there's, I can assume that there's a correlation between the safety challenges that are occurring there and the decision to fund those types of projects, as well as the other types of benefits and improvements those projects will make.
Great, thank you. And I would appreciate, I'm going to leap to my comment, I doubt if I'll have any later, which is that I would greatly appreciate staff coming back to the commission with status of those priority projects. I understand you got to get the plan officially approved by council, et cetera. But I would really like that, not just for our benefit, but it's a way to convey to the public what we're doing as a city in this really important area. So that's it, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Michaels.
Thank you. Would you mind pulling the 2 questions up on the screen, please? Great. Thank you for the informational presentation. It was really useful. Regarding the first one, it seems to me that these treatments are appropriate regarding the trends. My one question was, they seem to be addressing lowering speed, making intersections safer. I was wondering if there's any systematic treatment that's prioritized for running red lights. That seem to be one of a big accident causer and something that I've seen happening more and more frequently.
Hopefully I didn't turn that off. Nothing. So the intersection signal improvements are inherently something that can look at that. So as part of that, enhancements that would be happening as part of that is to help improve the visibility so that you reduce the likelihood of somebody not seeing the signal and running through a red light, and also to help reinforce that through either larger signal heads or increased visibility, as well as adjusting some of the signal timing to help make sure that that clearance timing is appropriate so that you don't have that. To address red light running, that is something that needs to be married up. If it is a intentional red light running that is happening, combined with enforcement or education tactics as well. And so that's, again, getting to that shared responsibility component that as kind of part of a larger thinking beyond the engineering of it, how do we communicate that by running red lights, people are putting not only their life at risk, but also other people that are using the roadway network at the same time. And so I think that kind of combining that education, enforcement, and the engineering work that we can do at the signal kind of all combined to help address that.
So enforcement wouldn't necessarily fit into this plan because it's not a design feature.
We do, so there is a discussion in the plan about some of the programmatic improvements that we would be looking at. I think in order for us to develop those more fully, we will be looking towards a more comprehensive Vision Zero plan, and that's something that's going to be multi-departmental when we work to develop that, so we can actually develop more comprehensive strategies for that, and not just simply allude to, enforcement is needed at this location, sort of thing.
Great, yeah, I guess I would just recommend to share this plan with the other departments that it may affect too, and it may not be direct impact, but that they could learn from as well. And then just going on Commissioner Robbins' question, those priority intersections that you mentioned, are they waiting for this plan to be adopted before those are implemented, or that's in the works anyway?
Yeah, those were previously adopted, the funding for those was previously approved by council, so no, they are not waiting for this project to move forward. If there are projects, there are times when we do have projects that say we've only gotten funding for like the design or planning part of it. This plan would help potentially qualify us for different dollars, a different pot of money that would address the safety issue altogether. And so that is, part of the advantage of having the plan. But at this time, we're not in that boat.
Great, thank you, great work.
Matt and Bethany, I'm going to address your 2 questions on my final comments and questions. I have some very specific questions on the plan that I'd like to go over here. The project development team included the fire department, San Mateo County Office of Education, San Mateo County Health, City of San Mateo Senior Citizens, the police department, and a resident from Baywood. Here's my question, is there was no one from the disabled community? And there are ample opportunities to include someone from the disabled community. We have disabled residents. The county has a commission on disability. There's 21 commissioners. Here in San Mateo, we have the Center for Independence, which is focused strictly on the disabled community. And so I'm wondering, we're a little late into this, but I'm wondering if we could, if it would make sense to expand the PDD and get someone from the disabled community on that team. And I know I'm echoing some comments I made last week during a Complete Streets workshop, but this, we talk about equity, and this is a group of people that I think equity's kind of passed them by a little bit. So I would like that to be considered. And also I noticed too in the report, it says the PDT, the project development team encouraged the project team, you folks, to look at the city's older population and origins and destinations to better understand and evaluate the sidewalk network. But the PDT, project development team, didn't encourage the project team to also consider the disabled community's point of view as well. And they could be very different, very, very different. And that group of residents, our disabled community residents, are housed. It's difficult for them to get out. They're isolated. And like I said, equity has not been on their side yet. So I just want to bring that out early. I was going to put it in my comments, but I want to just mention it here. There's a table, crashes by severity. It's table 4. It's actually on page 33 of the draft plan. And it shows by severity. It does not show any interaction between mobility, those that have mobility, that use mobility assisted devices, walkers, wheelchairs, whatever they are, and vehicles. Now, it could be that, I don't even know if that data is collected. I'm seeing Matt shake his head, no. Okay, that might be something useful to consider, because that now answers that question, because I had a few more questions on that. But if we don't collect that data currently, it would be useful for the city to collect that data and get that level of specificity for these people. Because that informs us. That informs us. Let's see. Another question I had also on the crashes by severity. Do we know the day and the time of day and the day of the crashes? And once again, right now we have crashes, PEDS, vehicles, bike vehicles, vehicles and objects. Hopefully, I'm looking forward to seeing mobility-assisted devices and also included. But do we know the day and time that these crashes happen? Okay, good. All righty. And I'll go back to that a little bit later. I'm looking at, there were maps shown of the city that showed the equity priority communities and the SSSA underserved communities. What is the what are those communities and what's the difference between them?
Yeah, so there are a number of different ways that equity has been defined, but different levels. And so the SS4A, underserved communities, is a federal definition that US DOT and federal highways have established, and that defines the ability to claim equity benefit as part of a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant specifically. It's also part of the federal guidance coming out of executive orders of addressing equity as part of transportation improvements and all projects. The equity priority communities are a definition at the regional level, so MTC, and so Those are when we talk about pursuing funds at the regional level, when they're evaluating whether a project is serving an equitable, a disadvantaged community, that they're using that criteria. So that's we're trying to show where those communities are that are going to be eligible for us to pursue funding, as well as where they have been identified at those different levels.
Sure. Okay, so one's a federal definition, that is the SSSA, and then one is a regional MTC, and the city has to kind of identify and work with both. But the benefit is that these communities could be eligible, most likely eligible for additional funding, and that really for projects within their community. Okay, great, thank you. I want to go back. I just have a few more questions here, 3 more. I want to go back to. I want to go to priority intersections. The El Camino and the 22nd Ave intersection is the city's highest, has the city's highest collision severity score. Currently, there's a crosswalk. The state, looks like the state put in a crosswalk and a pedestrian flashing light. And it's a very potent flashing light, I will say. But it appears not to be working. Does anybody have a sense why?
I just drove by there recently, and I know that it was working at that time.
I know
and so it is
works.
dark when it's not in operation. It goes dark when it's not in operation, and then when a pedestrian activates it, it does activate it, so it does turn on at that point.
Right.
And that's the appropriate type of operation for it.
Right. No, I understand that. Let me rephrase my question. I didn't do a good job there. My question is, I already see hardening at this intersection. We've got a very bright crosswalk on ECR, El Camino, and the 22nd Avenue. So there's a bright crosswalk, and there are some and it's a very, very prominent, should the pedestrian initiate it, signaling to drivers to stop because they want to cross. But yet, looking at the data, this intersection has the highest collision severity in the city. So I'm kind of just not trying to figure out why that is. Because I did see our data goes to 2022. I think, though I do know that this hardening was put in well before 2022. So I'm just trying to figure out why, despite this, what looks to be some pretty aggressive hardening by the state of California.
Yeah, certainly. So the primary reason for that is the time frame that we analyzed in the report. So I believe we analyzed 2017 to 2021, and during that time there was a before and after that installation. And so I believe that was installed maybe in 2018, 2019, and prior to that time, a time that we still analyzed in the analysis, there were a handful of really substantial collisions there, both fatal and severe injury collisions.
Got it.
So certainly at this point, we may see that there's a reduction if we look at a longer time period, but because of the amount of collisions that had happened there, both before and I think there's still some that have happened afterwards, and the severity and the number of them, that still ranks higher. When we go back and recollect or redo this analysis for future revisions of the LRSP, we may see that location drop off, but nonetheless, it still is a priority location. We can see that there's a history and a trend of collision, so even though that improvement has been made, it suggests that there's a more substantial amount of improvements that can be made to just really ensure that there's not a positive trend, positive meaning bad, of more collisions there.
Right, okay, all right, so that kind of explains, this, what I saw was aggressive hardening by the state, but yet you're saying, obviously we're collecting data starting in 2017. No, that went in 2017, or data, we start collecting data in 2017, that hardening is 2018, 2019 vintage. Okay, so we've got those 2 years, but over time it could flatten out maybe, but it's still on the radar screen. Okay, great, thank you. Here's another question on and this is priority intersections and priority roadway segments. If we look at the intersections under Tier 1, the Tier 1 intersections, 2 out of the 10 include the El Camino Real. And if we look at Tier 2, 2 out of the 10 involve the El Camino Real. And so, and if we look at priority roadway segments, 1 out of the 7 includes the El Camino Real. And here is my question. The El Camino is a state highway, and the state works at a different rate. It's got at times other challenging priorities. I mean, how can the city, because we have 5 between intersections and road segments that include the El Camino. I mean, the fact that these are El Camino, can the city even work on these intersections and road segments?
So the short answer is yes, that we can. We do have to seek approval from Caltrans in order to do so. And just to answer, I think the more broad question that you're asking is sort of what's the plan? Because we're seeing that there's a trend of challenging, it's rising to the top of some of our locations. We have already started working with Caltrans in a number of ways, and I want to sort of suggest that there's been a shift. I think that there had previously been a lot of lending to, well, that's El Camino, that's state right-of-way, they do what they do, we do what we do in our right-of-way.
Right.
But there definitely has been a sort of shift in the way that we think about El Camino, in taking a lot more ownership for it. Earlier on in this process, as we were identifying collision trends, we had identified early on, particularly in the downtown area, that that El Camino was, that there were vehicle pedestrian trends, collision trends identified at those locations. And so we were able to appeal to Caltrans after we had made those findings and asked them to implement things like the leading pedestrian intervals and the higher visibility crosswalks. And so that's work that we made the request to Caltrans for, and they took it upon themselves to make sort of approve our request and make those improvements themselves. And I think now we're going to start to move into a realm where we are making recommendations to Caltrans for improvements on El Camino and across El Camino for what we want to see, in particular how it ties both sides of our city that's on either side of it.
Yeah. And look, the reason I raised this question is, we have the El Camino, there's a total of 5, what we'll call high priority between intersections and roadways. And, cities, the El Camino, Caltrans, state bureaucracy, much slower than how we would like to move. So that's why I raised the question. And I don't know what to do if they drag their feet, or maybe, hopefully they don't, and they're cooperative and responsive.
Yeah, and I do want to add, if you don't mind, that
Sure,
there definitely has been a shift within Caltrans as well. Certainly the timeline and the speed at which they complete their projects and provide certain approvals is something that, I think we're still working through. But I think generally some of the things like Caltrans' adoption of the bike ped plan and their focus on bicycle and pedestrian safety is something that is starting to be incorporated in projects. So for instance, the El Camino and 92 intersection includes bike lanes right at that location. That's not something that the city had advocated for, but something that they included on their own. And so we're going to start to see those types of improvements being made more frequently. Another type of improvement is they had recently, I think, installed all high visibility crosswalk markings throughout all of their intersections here in the city. So those are the kinds of things that they're already taking up. And I think where we're wanting to see more specific changes that align more so with the way that we want our city and roadways to function, we will be working to appeal to them for that.
Okay, all right. So, Bethany, if you're optimistic, we're optimistic.
I appreciate that.
Right. Okay, final question here. The website, the traffic safety maps, 2017 to 2022, do you know when 2023 will be available?
I don't, but I can inquire about that. Our police department updates those maps.
Okay, and then you've probably just now answered my other question, because my other question is, who is the department responsible for adding the data, updating the data, and maintaining the databases? That's the police department.
Yes.
And then is it the police department who's responsible for ensuring it is on the website?
I think that there may be a policy question in there that we need to readdress. We had, again, when we had initially started this process to identify safety challenges within the city, I want to say that was back in 2019 time period, and one of the products of that effort when we were talking to council about that was these traffic safety maps. I would need to go back and see if there was a commitment for a certain amount of time that the police department was going to provide this specific city data, and sort of see where we landed with that. I don't recall offhand.
Yeah, because I think that's important. Obviously, staff needs it, we need it, the community needs it to help us all determine using factual data, real events of where things occur. So, yeah, we'll just keep an eye on that, but that will be a question to confirm it is the police, if not the police for a certain period of time, who, and then who also. So it's one thing to maintain the databases, and it's a whole other thing to make it available to the public. So I think there are two things that we just need to make sure we keep an eye on. Okay, that's all my questions. Let's go to the public. Do we have any in person?
Yes, one.
One, okay. And who is, yep. One online too. And one online, okay, super. Who is that?
It's Mike Swire.
Okay, Mike? Hello, Mike.
Hello. Thank you to members of the commission and staff and all the great work you guys do. Mike Swire, I sit on the SMCTA Citizen Advisory Committee and also the CCAG Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, so we see a lot of the projects flow through there. And you forgot to mention those funding sources, but we're glad to see them when they happen. Oops. And I walk, bike, and drive in the city of San Mateo, and I did walk here tonight. I did use the Hawk, and it's working fine, so that's good news. So I just want to remind everyone of the urgency of this issue. There was a 60-year-old mom on a bike who was hit by a hit-and-run driver last week. She broke her back. We're having a press conference tomorrow and a rally in support of her and street safety at 10:30 a.m. at Polhemus and Ascension, if anyone wants to join. I want to praise Sue Ellen and Bethany and all the different teams for all the hard work. I went to the Fiesta Gardens presentation last night. It was excellent. As a member of the CCAG BPAC, we evaluate these projects, and they did the best job I've seen in terms of submission. So you guys are in good hands. I'd encourage you to, if anything, to beef up their staff so that they can apply for this money that's honestly just sitting there. There's money on the table that nobody in the county is taking advantage of. And my understanding is that one of the big hurdles is that there's not enough staff time to apply for it. So that would be really great. And in terms of outreach, I think they're also doing an excellent job between these projects. When you look at the amount of outreach that goes on when we widen Highway 101 at a cost of $1 billion, these guys are doing more outreach locally for a $100,000 bike lane project. So just to put the irrationality in perspective there. This all gets down to funding. There's not enough money there for all these projects, unfortunately, and they can identify all these projects, and I believe that 90+% of the bike master plan has not been adopted. So I'd encourage the SIC to work with council and identify other funding sources like Measure S and getting more staff to apply for grants. And I hope that you share my sense of outrage that we have 3 times the fatal or severe crash rate of the state average, 2 times for pedestrians and 2 times for intersections. It makes no sense, and it's just going to get worse because we just widened 101, and there are going to be more people racing to the highway in the future. Also, I'd like some attention to be paid to the Hillsdale Bike Bridge, which has been planned for, bike and pedestrian bridge, planned for 20+ years, and was killed by the widening of the 101, is my understanding. And that's back to scratch, and the project's going to probably be much more expensive than previously. Right. And in terms of systemic changes, I think the no right on red, let's do something simple like no right on red citywide. San Francisco is doing that. It's a very quick and I think relatively inexpensive option for making a huge impact on public safety and also doing the LPIs everywhere. And to the question on enforcement with red light running, I just want to remind everyone that 5 years ago, the city of San Mateo got rid of all of its red light cameras, which were writing 20,000 or so tickets. And to my understanding, that has not been replaced by active enforcement from the, quote, 2 traffic police that usually run the streets every day. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Sure, thank you.
I think some of Mike's comments could be included in that systemic question. Oops. Sorry, everyone. You know, we've lost our, that's my alarm. We've lost our clock, our speaker timer.
It was on, he went over.
We didn't see it here.
It was up, no?
Oh, yeah. I didn't see it on my screen. Oh, I didn't see it on mine. Oh, you know, it's important. It helps us. Okay, now okay, so any more in-person speakers? Okay.
Two more online.
Okay, 2 online? Okay. Who's our first online?
Laura Watanuki.
Hello?
Hello? Hi.
Hi, Laura.
I'm wondering, are you on the LSRP now, or are you on Complete Streets for?
We're on the LSRP.
Okay, I will wait then for the Central Complete Streets.
Okay, that's our next agenda item. Thank you. Okay, who?
Max Botner.
Okay. Hello, Max?
Oh, am I unmuted?
Yep, there you go, Max.
Oh,
we
great.
can hear you.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, you've got a couple of minutes here. Hopefully you see the timer.
I do. Thank you. Yeah, these 4 systemic improvements sound really good to me. That's pretty much my comment. The question, I guess the question I had formulated in my mind is, with respect to these being improvements that would diminish risk of severe injuries to our residents and folks passing through, whether any of these grants, grant money could effectively go towards things that would encourage walking and biking and non-car transit, like sidewalk maintenance or sidewalk widening, to some of the points that Susan mentioned about getting out the front door and moving, whether you're disabled or not. It's something that impedes some of my neighbors from using the roadways as a pedestrian, is just how narrow some of the sidewalks are on my side of North San Mateo. So I was just curious, the extensibility of applying for grant money from the federal government for projects that extend beyond diminishing the risk of severe injury. That was it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Max. I'm not too sure if there was a question there from Max, but is there a quick answer?
I think the quick answer is that there certainly are funds out there to make improvements to enhance or to encourage biking and walking. Measure A through the TA, for instance, is one that has one for bike and ped improvements. So there are certainly funding sources for that. I think that the funding sources that we would be looking towards, that we would be able to work for with this particular plan, are safety related, safety specific, and they're there to address identified safety issues. And unfortunately, I don't think the narrow sidewalks is something that we've identified as a trend that's lending to collisions in our city, and so we wouldn't be able to use safety funds for that. But certainly a desire to widen sidewalk might be something to look at through perhaps our Complete Streets plan, and we can receive those types of requests otherwise, and we have other funding sources for those.
Okay, so someone like Max should keep an eye on Complete Streets.
Yes.
That would be more appropriate venue. Okay, thank you. Any more speakers? Nope. Bring it back to the commission for final comments and questions. Responding to Bethany's 2 questions, if not done already.
Go ahead. Okay,
Go
yes.
right ahead,
I think I've already responded. I have no further comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nothing further from me.
Commissioner Riddlemeyer?
Yes, I found the first question that I was trying to raise, and maybe I'm just reading this wrong. It's on page 51 of the plan. The aging and young drivers at the very bottom. And I get where it says, 11% of the fatal and severe injury collisions involved a driver 65 or older. And then it talks about drivers 18 to 64. But there seems to be a percentage missing. And it doesn't talk about young drivers.
Yeah, I think we probably missed something, a statistic in there, so we can make sure that that gets added back in there. It is associated with a higher frequency, excuse me. So 14% within the city, if you go back to the table on the page just prior to that, 14% of fatal and serious injuries for the young drivers as part of that challenge area. So we'll make sure that that gets updated.
Okay, so that would be drivers 16 to 18, or 16 and 17, just 16 and 17?
The age cutoff for the young is under 18. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just purely defined as under 18, and so that would assume 16 and 17, certainly.
Okay. Interesting. I think that might be something to look further into, how that can be prevented, how that number can be reduced, lowered, or down to zero. Because that really brings us back to our problems with school, around schools, where some of these young drivers might be driving, and just how congested they get and dangerous for all. But I don't know where those collisions are happening. It'd be interesting to see where those collisions are happening with the young drivers. Okay, no further comments or questions other than I agree, the no right on red, the leading pedestrian signals. I'm wondering maybe if scrambles can fit in anywhere, and that if that's more economical than, or is it the same cost as like a leading pedestrian?
So the LPI is certainly cheaper to install than a pedestrian scramble or an exclusive pedestrian phase, certainly. And we are certainly looking at locations where it makes sense to implement them. So I think as a systemic treatment, it's a little bit more challenging because the balancing between safety and the benefit, the cost, certainly the vehicle delay that it introduces is all something that's being factored in on a sort of location by location basis. And I don't think we've done the necessary amount of analysis to be able to identify those system-wide, but it is definitely something on staff's radar, and we are looking for opportunities for those.
Okay, great. That's it. Thank you.
Stephanie, can you put up your two questions? Because I'm going to respond to them now in my final comments. I don't have any further questions, but I want okay. So these are the two questions you've asked us to respond to. Before I do that, I also have a couple of comments. I'm going to use this as my comment period, this framework as my comment period. A comment I have that's not included in these two is, I would recommend when you send out invitations to the public for pop-up events or whatever they are, to include the commission on that. And if we're, it's nice for us to know that, and I'm sure if we are available, we might be interested in attending. And it's an easy way for us to get introduced to the project. It doesn't require any additional meetings on your part with us. You can kind of hit two birds with one stone, for lack of a better term, with the public and the commissioners. So I would highly, highly recommend when you've got invitations going out to the public, we are citywide. We have to look at the entire city, regardless of where that is. Those invitations go out to the commission. I didn't receive anything on pop-up events or anything like that, so.
I don't know if it's okay
And
to
you don't have to
respond
respond
at this
to
point.
any of this, yeah. So that's just one comment. These are just comments for you. Regarding, I found it challenging to find that traffic safety maps on the website. They were found under data transparency. Kind of hard to find, and my recommendation is to consider moving those safety maps once we figure out who builds them and maintains them onto the home page. And there's a drop-down menu of what's called the Services tab, and to put it in there, I thought might be an appropriate place to put it. Like I said, it took me about 20 minutes. I'm pretty web savvy, and I couldn't find this one. So I think making it more prominent, that's a suggestion, homepage under Services. Now to answer the questions here, systemic treatment's appropriate for the measures and types of trends and community feedback received. I would say yes. However, going back to, and I'm going to be pretty adamant about this, I would like to see a member of the disabled community involved sooner than later, because we're coming now towards, I'm hearing Matt say this plan's going to get wrapped up sometime spring, summer timeframe. We're already kind of in the seventh inning. And so it would be ideal to get somebody involved to make sure that we have not overlooked anything before the plan goes before City Council. And as I mentioned, there are ample resources. We have residents. We have, in fact, in the prior meeting, there was a wheelchair resident who attended the training session. We've got any of the commissioners at the county level, at the Disabled Commission, and we also have the Center for Independence. Those are three sources to get somebody involved in this plan and have someone look at it through their lens. So that is what I see. That to me is what's missing. Regarding your second question, issues you'd like to see addressed in systemic treatments, let me just add a couple here. I think there are some new issues for consideration. Ensure that the police have instructed LAS. LAS is a contracted service on parking in our city, but they report into the police. They're very good, by the way. I've found them to be exceedingly responsive to concerns throughout San Mateo. But have the police instruct LAS that high priority calls and responses are to vehicles parked in crosswalks, vehicles that are blocking sidewalks. So we could use the police to direct LAS, because obviously they've got a plate full of complaints. But if they get complaints related to for crosswalks and blocked sidewalks, that those are high priority. Let me see, what else did I have here? Here's something I thought. Public service announcements, to have the pedestrians, the disabled, and bicyclists wear high-vis clothing. You know, you can't, it's really more an education than it is anything else. I will share with you, at my rowing club, which has been around now 20 years, we've had a constant campaign of wearing high-vis on the water, and now everybody wears high-vis, and we have about 200 members. So it works. It has to be consistent, and it has to go year after year, but it's an education campaign on wearing high-vis so you can be seen by vehicles. Other suggestions I have for the second, are there other issues you'd like to see? Santa Ynez Avenue over in North Central. It's a Tier 2 priority intersection. However, Santa Ynez had 3 of the 10 Tier 2 intersection incidences. So it's a Tier 2, but they had 3 out of the 10, or 30%. And I would move Santa Ynez because of that. When you look at it collectively, that collective frequency, I would move Santa Ynez. It was Tier 2 at El Camino eastbound and westbound, and then Santa Ynez at Humboldt. So I've got 3 on Santa Ynez. I would take Santa Ynez, I would move it up to Tier 1. I will share with you, when I added up the score for each of those 3 centers, they actually came out with the highest severity score. So, but that's my recommendation on Santa Ynez over in North Central, is to move them up. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you. So that concludes our update on the local roadway safety plan. Once again, thank you to the public, Mike, Bethany, Matt, and staff. So I have a question for everyone. We have one more item here, the North Central plan. Does anyone want to take a 5-minute break? Okay. All right, so why don't we return back at 10 p.m. Okay, everyone, we're gonna reconvene here and move to our next discussion item, which is the introduction of the complete streets for the north central part of our city. This item is informational, and as a result, does not require a motion or a vote from the commission. We'll begin the presentation. We'll begin with the presentation from Sue Ellen Atkinson, our principal transportation planner for the city, and Christian Alano, did I get that? Alano, who is the director at Winter Consulting. So following presentation by staff, we'll go through a round of questions from the commission. We'll go out to the public for public comment. And after public comment, we'll bring it back for final questions from the commission, as well as comments. So on that note, Sue Ellen, it's yours.
Thank you, Chair Rowinski. Again, Sue Ellen Atkinson, Principal Transportation Planner with the city's Public Works Department. And tonight we're introducing the Complete Streets North Central Plan. There. All right, so quick overview of what we'll be discussing tonight. We'll be going over what the Complete Streets North Central Plan is, how we're approaching this plan, which is a little different than the way that we've approached prior plans. We'll be sharing highlights from our engagement to date, looking through comments that we've received pertaining to specific locations, and talking through next steps. As the chair noted, this item is informational only. We don't have any specific feedback requests for you tonight. General comments, questions, etc., are more than welcomed. So first, just a refresher on what a complete street is. Right now, most of the roadways in the city have really been designed for vehicle travel. And Complete Streets' approach to roadway planning really looks at how we're designing our roadways for people to get around using different forms of transportation. So looking at how we can use our roadway space for people who are driving and walking and taking transit and getting around by other means and biking. So that's the effort that we're looking at citywide through our citywide Complete Streets Plan. And then we wanted to focus in on what makes the Complete Streets North Central Plan different. So when we began the citywide Complete Streets Plan, City Council directed staff to engage in a separate effort in the North Central neighborhood. North Central is a very unique neighborhood with unique challenges, including very narrow streets, high residential density, and residents that get around by a number of different ways. So the North Central Complete Streets Plan really focuses in on developing a safe, reliable, accessible, and equitable multimodal transportation system in that community. And it's really being developed through a collaborative community engagement process where we're really focused on listening to the community members and learning more about the needs and the concerns in the North Central community specifically. And then we'll be able to take that information and turn that into a set of recommendations that are specific to the needs of the North Central neighborhood. So as I mentioned, the plan approach for the Complete Streets North Central Plan is slightly different than how we've approached even the citywide Complete Streets Plan. In the North Central Complete Streets Plan, we're really taking a lot of time in the listening stage. As Christian will talk through in just a moment, we've done quite a lot of community engagement since August. And as you'll see in the next steps, really all of the work to date has been community engagement focused. So we began with our listening effort of stakeholder interviews, et cetera, and community engagement events that we'll go into detail on. And that helped us to identify and define the needs and the goals for the community. And those needs and goals and the feedback received from the community is really what defines how we're going to approach the plan and what types of improvements will be recommended. So all of the information that we've gotten to date will turn into recommendations that are supported by what we've heard in the community and that are data supported. So those recommendations are going to be responsive to the specific concerns that we've heard. So for example, if the concern is speeding along a certain corridor, we have options from a toolbox of countermeasures very similar to the LRSP that we can apply to certain situations like speeding, like pedestrian crossing concerns, et cetera. And really start to mix and match approaches to each of the concerns that we're hearing and make those recommendations. That means that we'll have a lot of recommendations coming out, and we need to prioritize and identify priority projects in order to help us implement in the future. We need to have the priorities so that we know what order to be looking for funding and how to apply project funding so that we can move forward into implementation. So during that prioritization and priority project development is where we'll start grouping projects together and doing additional community engagement on any projects that are more substantial in nature. So for example, if there's a recommendation to create a one-way road or more than one-way road, then we would do some specific outreach, including like door-to-door canvassing on that corridor to really get specific outreach to the neighborhood or the street where more impactful projects may be going in. And then finally, we'll get into the plan development phase by bringing together the project recommendations and also programmatic recommendations. So as I mentioned to date, we've partaken in the initial listening stage and defining those needs and goals. So in terms, again, of feedback for tonight, we are not coming to you with project recommendations or specific improvement recommendations at this point because we've really been focusing on that engagement. And on that note, I will turn it over to Christian to lead you through our recap.
Great. Thank you, Sue Ellen. My name is Christian Olano. I am with Winter Consulting. We conduct community engagement for a variety of transportation projects throughout the Bay Area. And to give you a snapshot, we just have completed phase 1 of engagement, but we have already done a lot. So since August, from August to December, we've already spoken to over 200 North Central residents in person in both Spanish and English. We've conducted 3 focus groups, 4 pop-up tabling events, and had 2 lived experience group meetings, which I'll elaborate on later. And as is important for for us, it's important to have Spanish interpretation provided at the variety of events that we have, given the unique demography of North Central. Also key to this project is our stakeholder partnerships. For us in our engagement approach, we think it's important to have stakeholder partnerships and to go deep and also broad with our engagement. So that includes the lived experience group members that have supported us and give us valuable insights onto equitable engagement approaches. We've also partnered with local events such as National Night Out, Movies in the Park, and also with the faith community, holding some pop-ups at a variety of churches in North Central that are at key intersections throughout the neighborhood, and also partnering with one of the key neighborhood associations, the North Central Neighborhood Association here in North Central. So with the lived experience group, for this project, as Sue Ellen mentioned, it has unique challenges. North Central experiences unique transportation challenges. So we brought in a new and different approach that adds onto the traditional engagement that we conduct. The LEG is composed of 5 community members representing a diversity of ages, races, and ethnicities, and unique lived experiences, all who live in North Central and were selected for their connections to other residents and dedication to improving transportation access, safety, and mobility in the neighborhood. The LEG consists, they meet at a total of 3 stages during the project. They've already met twice, one to identify needs and another to weigh in on priorities and potential improvements. And the goal of the LEG is to bring in their unique perspectives and insights through collaboration, provide feedback on the plan that reflects the challenges and concerns faced by residents. So just to elaborate on some of our events that we've done, here are some photos. Very, very lively. We think we had many approaches, again, going broad and also going deep. Here you can see National Night Out, leveraging some of the popularity around those events. We also went to movies in the park to catch children and parents and families that were attending those during the summer. We went to a food distribution pop-up at the Macedonia Church on the corner of Claremont and Tilton, where we also observed on the spot there some of the challenges faced with transportation at that intersection. We did a pop-in meeting at the Hanson Neighborhood Association a couple months back and had a series of residents focus groups meeting people where they were at to really dig in deep with their concerns. And then finally, we did a pop-up at the Community Baptist Church, which serves as one of the busiest bus stops for the city, I believe, engaging with families. And that's where we engage with a lot of the Spanish-speaking community as well. So again, just highlighting some of the photos here. With the pop-up tabling events, I think it's important to note we were able to engage a large number of community members, but our questionings couldn't go super deep, but were able to engage with many. So our questions were small, but we were able to gather input from a variety of different people. So those are some of the events that we gathered there. We asked, what do you enjoy most about the city, but also how do you move throughout North Central, and what needs do you identify when you move throughout the city as well, or throughout the community as well. And then for our next set of type of engagement activities, we had focus groups and pop-ins that really allowed us to sit in for an hour or so with particular individuals and dig deep into their lived experiences of moving around North Central and sort of go into their experiences in detail. So this is just a snapshot. I won't go into this into too much depth because it's still in draft, but for any comments that we've received, so you know, every individual comment is inputted into a singular Excel sheet, so it makes for easier analysis. But for any location-specific comments, those have been mapped out here, so that will help the technical team identify the best type of improvements to put there, and for us to get a glimpse of the different improvements, what the community is trying to let us know at large. And then finally, my final slide here is just to give you a quick recap of the highlights to date. So again, this is non-exhaustive, and since we're only completed with phase 1, this could change by the end of this project, but here are some of the top things that have surfaced. So traffic safety concerns, recurring theme across all the events, with residents expressing concerns about speeding, parking congestion, and narrow streets, posing risks for both drivers and pedestrians and cyclists. Visibility and turning safety. Many residents emphasize the need for better visibility through safe turning practices, tree trimming and enforcing no parking zones, safety infrastructure improvements, calling for safety infrastructure improvements such as speed bumps, stop signs, flashing beacon, crosswalks, to enhance safety in the neighborhood. Understanding that there's limited right-of-way with the narrow streets, creating safety congestion and issues around parking, neighborhood aesthetics and identity. So this was something that was mentioned, that residents have seen an increase of people parking their cars on not just their driveways, but also on their lawns as well, and that affecting the neighborhood image and their pride in the neighborhood. Public transportation improvements. There were demands for improved public transit options, including more frequent bus services, extended routes, and better access to Caltrain. Enforcement of regulations. Many residents mentioned the need for enforcing regulations related to speeding, no parking zones, and littering. And even though this wasn't pertaining to transportation specifically, we did gather some insights on a variety of other topics, including illegal activities and enforcement, concerns about illegal dumping, fireworks, gunshots, and street racing activities that we thought were important to capture. And finally, to note that generally people have great pride in the neighborhood. Like, I forgot to mention, for limited right-of-way, many people, residents specifically mentioned that the addition of bike lanes create a parking deficit in the neighborhood already burdened with limited parking. Even more so, they do have pride, and no one really wanted to leave, and I think there is an intention for people to devote their time and energy to seeking improvements in transportation here in North Central, and that some of the things that they value include the MLK Junior Park and the center as a main hub for community activity, and that was really inspiring for us and the engagement team to hear. So with that, I'll pass it back to Sue Ellen.
Thanks, Christian. So in terms of what do we do with all of the information that we've gathered? The next step is to essentially mix and match potential improvements to the concerns that we've heard. And this, just having walked through the LRSP presentation, may be very familiar, but there are certain potential improvements that can address different situations, and then certain groups of improvements that may go together. So for example, at locations where we've heard concerns about pedestrian crossing, we can look at crosswalks, raised crosswalks, flashing beacons, et cetera. For areas where there are concerns about narrow roadways, if looking at a one-way roadway is something that's looked at as part of the plan, that would be one potential improvement, but then you need to step back and take a look at what other concerns may come as a result of that potential improvement and potentially group together things. So if you're looking at converting a two-way roadway to a one-way, that may result in a really wide travel lane that actually encourages speeding, and where there wasn't speeding before. So then you may have to implement more than one type of improvement, like one-way roadways, plus speed cushions or raised crosswalks, et cetera. So that's kind of the mixing and matching that needs to come as part of our next steps. And then something that we started talking about with our LEG members, and then we'll be going out into the community starting later this month, is the trade-offs coming as part of those improvements. So when you're looking at some improvements, there are trade-offs that need to be considered. For example, there's new state legislation around red curb or no parking around marked and unmarked crosswalks, and that would result in the removal of parking spaces around intersections. So there's trade-offs in terms of parking. There's trade-offs, if you're looking at certain improvements like crosswalks, that they may not be implemented at all locations because we want to try to funnel people toward crossings where we can have that protection rather than have multiple locations. So really looking at potential improvements that are context sensitive and respond to the comments that we've received, and then addressing potential trade-offs that may arise as a result of those. So in terms of schedule and next steps, as I mentioned, we've been working on this project for quite some time, and it's been almost entirely devoted to doing community engagement to date. So right now we're starting with the development of those recommendations based on what we've heard and what we're seeing in the data. And then we'll be going into that priority project development. In terms of upcoming engagement, again, we'll be doing focus groups, more dedicated door-to-door outreach, and potential engagement events around priority projects once they're determined. Since we haven't yet started to identify projects, we don't know what that outreach will look like specifically. We also have a community workshop that we're hosting in coordination with the Home Association of North Central San Mateo, and that will be at the King Center on the evening of March 28th. So we will get information about that out to you. So that at that point, we'll start taking this information back out to the community. Again, this information was just presented for an update and introduction to the commission. No specific feedback is requested, but Christian and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have. And that concludes staff presentation.
Okay, thank you, Christian and Sue Ellen. So we'll start with a round of questions. We'll then go to the public, come back for final questions and comments. Who would like to start?
I'll start.
Okay, Commissioner Riddlemeyer, please.
Thank you, Sue Ellen and Christian. Okay, it's getting late. Bus stops. I think I remember seeing in there some bus stop improvements were being talked about. Is that something the city does, or is that a Samtrans?
Bus stop improvements could be Samtrans if they have funding or projects going on, but it could also be something that the city undertakes. Samtrans is currently, I believe, finalizing their bus stop improvement plan, and that gives guidelines on what type of bus stop, shelter, or type would go at what type of stop. And it is late, and I didn't say that very well. But that will help us determine what type of improvements to include at each of the locations based on frequency and based on land use, et cetera.
Okay, so it could go either way.
It could.
Yeah. And funding for all of these great ideas that you have here.
For implementation, okay. That's the question for citywide complete streets, for North Central, for the LRSP. For projects that are identified in the North Central Complete Streets Plan specifically, there is intention that future years of community development block grant funding, or CDBG funding, that the city receives from the Department of Housing and Urban Development would be utilized towards implementation of the projects in this plan. It won't be sufficient annually to do it very quickly, but the intention is to utilize this plan to guide how we're using that funding and implementing it in the future. And that funding is specifically for equity priority communities, of which North Central is one of ours.
Okay, great. And parking on lawns, we hear this a lot in North Central, this complaint. One of these, just in your report here, there's a quote from a community member who says it's against city code. Can you tell me more about that?
Very generally, but I can research that and get back to you a little bit more in depth. There is language in the municipal code regarding parking on lawns, and also how much of a front yard you can pave. And that is something that could be re-examined or could remain the same, but that would be something in coordination with Community Development Department. And at the moment, if there are concerns about it, that would be something that code enforcement would be able to look into. But I can follow up with you for more specific information.
Yeah, but I'm more interested in different designs that might allow some parking and some, different surfaces that are not all grass or not all concrete, but something in the middle. I spend a lot of time in Japan every summer or every year. And that's a place where there is no street parking. Everybody parks on their property. So people have become very creative in how they have made it so that it's, they can park a car there, it doesn't get muddy, but it's not just pure concrete, but it's a lot more attractive. So I'm wondering if there's different designs that might be allowable by city code, that you can park there, but you still also have some greenery.
I think that might be a question best discussed with the Community Development Department. In terms of this plan, there could be a programmatic recommendation to look at those options, but we also have to weigh that with the feedback from the residents that additional cars parking in one's front yard is not something that's desired.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Robbins?
Yeah, great stuff. The engagement, I just have to note, a significant effort. It's always been a challenge in this city, and y'all have just done an incredible job. So that's really great stuff. And thank you for that. I only have one question. At least my take is that the impetus for all this has been it was back when we did the bike lanes, and everybody was up in arms over the loss of parking. So I'm wondering if through this engagement, if parking was the primary or significant or majority of the comments and complaints, or whether that's receded and is only one of, maybe every neighborhood has issues and just one of many issues.
I'll take a go at this, and Christian can correct me if I'm wrong. Parking is definitely something that came up at every engagement event, but it was probably top 3 with traffic safety concerns and speeding concerns. So I don't want to diminish that as one of the concerns in the neighborhood, because it certainly was a topic of conversation at every engagement event. But there are a number of other concerns that really, I think, shared the top rank as well.
No, I wouldn't.
You turned it up. Yep.
I just echo what you said. I think it was mentioned at every single engagement event, but I think to put in context that this plan is so much more than that, but it surfaces top 3, as Sue Ellen mentioned.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was really my only question. I'll throw one comment on top. That's actually good to hear. As a father of a daughter who went through the 4 years at San Mateo High, parking was the least of the issues. I mean, safety and traffic were a nightmare around that school. She's well off in college, so I don't go down there much anymore. But it's good to hear that there's not just the parking issue. That's all I've got. Thanks, y'all, very much.
Commissioner Michael.
Thank you. That's actually a good segue to my question. My only question was, and it's great to just see this plan. It seems like it's very much listening to the community and trying to meet their needs. But I don't know, I may have missed it, but I was wondering what role the schools had in the plan, because I'm guessing safe routes to school is a very big deal in that neighborhood. And if that'll be addressed, or just what the connection is, or if it's to come.
Both school districts, the San Mateo Foster City School District as well as the San Mateo Union High School District, have been great partners for us, both on this plan and on the citywide Complete Streets plan, and have allowed us to host focus groups at their school sites, which have been really great locations, and have shared information about our outreach events through their district communications and through school sites. In terms of safe routes to school, we do have a part-time safe routes coordinator on staff, and so any programmatic measures that may relate to schools would be something that she would be brought in on as part of that implementation. But also in terms of coordinating with the school district, the College Park School is going to be swapping with Fiesta Gardens in the next couple of years. And so that's been something that's been a topic at our outreach, actually on both plans. But, really for North Central, they're going to be building out that site to eventually be a K-8 school and have a lot more kids that are accessing that location. So that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're developing our improvements, is the potential for additional kids accessing that site, parents and guardians accessing the site, and potential for additional use of getting there by foot, by scooter, by bike, et cetera, if there is additional neighborhood attendance there. So in terms of coordinating with the schools, I think we have a really great relationship with them on both of these plans, but we had to go a little bit more in depth specifically for the change in school coming up.
Great, thank you. I would just recommend highlighting that more in the report, because I may have missed it. Thank you.
Okay. My questions are going to be focused on your engagement. And Kristen, you heard some of this from me on Thursday. So you did this massive engagement between August of 2023 through December of 2023. You talked to 200 people in North Central, very good. We had a couple of focus panels, and we have 3 live groups I've noticed. Can you tell me, out of the 200 people you spoke with, how many were part of the disabled community?
Sorry, the red throws me off. So I can't dictate or express a specific number, but I would say in our pop-ups, especially when we were at the food distribution at the North Macedonia Church, there are several people who were part of that disability community who spoke with us, who were crossing the street, and we spoke to them. So I would say to about 10 to 15 but I can't, we haven't coded that specifically.
I would also add that we don't collect that information specifically unless somebody self-identifies, because not all disabilities are visible.
Right. I liked your live experience group. That would have been ideal to have someone have a disabled group of people and understand deeply how they live. Can we add that to your engagement process?
We can look for ways in the third round of engagement to be more descriptive in that. Our lived experience group has already met for 2 of their 3 meetings. That's a group that was established early on in the project, and they're receiving a small compensation for their participation. So at this time, adding another member, I don't think would be in the best interest of the project, but we can certainly see what we can do in the last round of engagement.
Right.
To do additional outreach.
So is the LIFT different than the LEG? LEG is Live Experience Group.
It's the same.
Oh, it's the same. All righty. Okay. Yeah, so I'm saying not to add new members to the existing LEG groups. I'm saying to add a new LEG group of disabled persons.
I think that may be something that we would have to do less formally, given the stage of the project that we're at and the project scope that we have and budget. But certainly we've heard your comment and take that to heart for future additional outreach.
Right.
We have, and I'll just add, we have additional, we have scope to do more tours, more focus groups. So we could potentially do a focus group specifically for the disability community. That could be.
Yeah, I think I would add that on the radar screen. This is an opportunity here. We're looking at complete streets. We're looking at a local safety road plan that's citywide, and yet we are not actively seeking input from these people. And it's been consistent. And the ADA, the city has got, the city went ahead and did a citywide assessment, an ADA citywide assessment. And that was done, actually I was part of that effort, working with 2 disabled persons when Brad Underwood was the director. But that's not the same. That's about putting in curbs and whatnot. What we're talking about here is connectivity for these people and safety and access and equity. So I would really like, and I must sound like a broken record by this point, Sue Ellen, you've heard it from me now 3 times in less than a week. But I can't figure out why this group is left out. We've got ample resources. There are residents. You've done a lot of work to go in and get and talk to North Central residents. You know how to do it. So that's my question, and also it's going to be my comment. I just can't figure out why they're always left out. And we have all this planning taking place, citywide planning, and they're not part of it. Yeah, there's no, you don't have to, I was going to ask a question. I now went into my comments. I'm sorry. Let's go to the public. Do we have any public speakers here? Remote, in person? Okay, super. Come on up and join us. Oh, is your mic on? There we go.
Okay. My name is Trina Pierce. I'm from North Central. Me and Sue Ellen are becoming friends lately after all my complaints. I deal with a lot of seniors and disabled, so I give kudos to you for tonight. It was well worth me staying so long. When this stuff started, there were no pop-ups. We were very upset about that. No pops-up, so I give them credit for doing the pop-ups now. But we've lost the parking, 250 parking spaces. I hear it from seniors all the time. I cannot drive these seniors around. When they call me, I have to say no sometimes, and that makes me feel so bad. So we've asked, when we started this, we asked could we just do like a shared space like on Delaware. These seniors are being put in their houses. If they don't get out of their house by a certain time, they don't leave. Because when they come back, there's nowhere to park. So it really frustrates me to hear that we've got all this buses and, they took the buses away from Humboldt long years ago. So they got to walk up to Delaware. And, seniors are dying because they can't get out. And it's just not right. And I don't understand why, when they said, when they talked about the church, that church had to come up here. I had talked to them so many times. They finally came up there, and I think they were talked to around 11 o'clock, but they stayed, and they were tired. The red was removed. They give out food there. I give out food to seniors from the Harvest Food Bank. They couldn't even give out food. Some people weren't coming because of the red being there, and they couldn't park. They finally removed that, and I appreciate that too. They need to remove some more of that red. So, my time's up, but I didn't plan on speaking.
Actually, how many public speakers do we have? We have Mike, and who's online?
Looks like one.
All right, so let's give everybody 3 minutes. Let's give Tricia here another 2 minutes.
Okay. So I just feel bad, I deal with, my son was disabled too, but he got around. He was blessed by God to do a lot more. But when I was younger, I'll be 70 pretty soon. When I was younger, the people from my church, the seniors, they took care of me. They took care of my son. They prayed. They brought me food to church. So this is why I help these seniors, and this is why I help disabled. But I so agree with you. The input was not there. We were also promised when we lost 250 parking spaces that more lights would be put up. There has not been a light put up in North Central. It's just not right. Those people are walking. I've had one girl that fell, and her mom wouldn't go to the hospital with her because they were undocumented. I said, I don't care. You've got to go. Raccoons come out of those things and scare the heck out of people. Kids, and we're upset about people parking on the grass, but what can you do? Their kids are getting off at 12 o'clock at night working from Cheesecake Factory. Who wants their kids walking like that? They have called me up and said, Trina, can you go pick up, my daughter? She's going to have to park way down there. I let them use my house to park because I have a rental house that's not being rented right now. Long story. So, I let them park there. But I just don't feel like, and seniors, it's just not right. They made this property. I've been in my house for over 40 years. I've only been in San Mateo. I went to St. Matthews and I went to Mercy. I know a lot of these seniors. I know a lot of these grandkids. And they kept up this neighborhood. They're the reason why North Central is so nice. But now it's like, so what? But anyway, my time is up. Okay. But thank you.
All right. Thank you, Trina.
Mike Swire.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll keep it under 20 minutes this time, sorry. So my kids go to San Mateo High School, which is in North Central, go Bearcats, and I frequently walk and drive in the area. And anecdotally, there are just too many kids still getting hit by cars there. A 13-year-old girl was hit on Delaware right in front of the district office right next to San Mateo High last fall. My daughter's friend was hit while crossing Delaware after school. And a couple of years ago, they had a serious crash with a female student in the intersection at Delaware and Poplar. And there's too many kids that drive to school, even though they don't live that far away. It does serve a larger area, but it's frustrating that Palo Alto can have 60% of kids biking or walking to school, and it's probably single digits, maybe 10+% there. I haven't seen good numbers. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but I think we can certainly do better than that. And unfortunately, the traffic and the danger, it's getting worse. So again, we just widened Highway 101 from 4 to 5 lanes, and the Poplar on-ramp is right there. So every morning, you get all the traffic coming down the hill, basically getting on Poplar, and it's backed up all the way to the high school, Humboldt, or even Delaware, and those cars are racing through. And those are people that honestly don't live there necessarily, and they don't really care about speeding through with all the kids. And from a bike lane perspective, I would say that things are, I think they've really helped, not just for bikers, but for everyone else. I mean, the roads are more narrow now. So when I walk that neighborhood, I notice the cars are going less fast, which helps everybody, helps people on foot, helps people in cars, helps people on bikes. And the bike traffic is slowly increasing. I was there on Bike to Work Day last year, and I counted 100 bikes within an hour, either in the bike lanes or crossing around in that neighborhood. So people are certainly using it, especially when you consider the San Mateo High School geography covers Foster City and the east side of 101 too. So we have a real opportunity to get those kids out of cars, and they're all terrible drivers, including my kids, so I can speak from experience. And then my only recommendations, I know we've talked about this, are to maybe increase the physical separation in the bike lanes. At Poplar and Ellsworth, at Delaware and Poplar, there's 2 areas where there's a lot of people parking in the bike lanes, either because they're going to the store there or to that Starbridge Academy. And I think that's it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, so is that all for in-person speakers? Okay, great. And we're going to go remote. Are they on phone or remote? Remote, okay. Who do we have up?
Is Laura Watanuki?
Okay. Lori?
Hi.
Hi there. We can hear you. You've got 3 minutes. Can you see the clock?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Great.
Good evening, Chairman Rowanski, and also members of the commission. It's nice to see what this Complete Streets is kind of getting started and with all the public engagement. I wanted to give some input for that, and I just wanted to make sure that there is enough east-west, the ability to go east-west and getting into the downtown from North Central. My concern is that Humboldt is a very busy street, and you cannot make a right turn on 3rd Avenue. So we don't want to have a situation where all this traffic gets redirected into another neighborhood, going through Humboldt and going down 5th or going all the way to 9th to getting into the downtown. So that's one concern I have. The other thing is there are 250 parking spaces that have been removed. And what we're beginning to see is on 4th Avenue on the north side is pushing into our neighborhood. So there could be this redirection of parking coming into the central neighborhood. So it's important that you find a solution to this parking for the north central neighborhood. This evening you mentioned the disabled and the handicapped and the seniors. Is there any way of providing some shuttle service for these seniors so they could get to Samtrans or to get to where it is that they need to go, if it's a doctor's appointment or whatever? The other thing is on 5th Avenue, we're supposed to have a bike boulevard, and we'd like to see that bike boulevard used, and if we can get traffic calming on 5th Avenue and 9th Avenue, we could get people to use bikes and use these Humboldt Street bike lanes. And I think that's really important to get that traffic calming. I'd like to see the reclassification of those streets that have been turned into minor arterials. And I'd like to see the NTMP also updated so that traffic calming can be applied to the non-arterials. But it's the redirection of traffic coming through Humboldt and the redirection of parking shifting into another neighborhood that I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. We have one more speaker. Okay. And who is that?
Max Montner.
Okay. Hello, Max. Max?
Trying to get the mute button working. Sorry.
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. So I live just outside of the study area for the studies defined North Central neighborhood. So I wasn't solicited so much for input in the survey, although I got a lot of close friends in the study area, and I walk, bike, jog through North Central multiple times a week. One of the things I'm curious about is, entering and exiting the study area. One of the big assets in my mind in North Central is the accessibility over the Monte Diablo bike ped bridge. I'm really impressed with how the city, I think through Public Works, upkeeps that bridge and makes it clean, well lit, feels safe. I see, minors, women, elderly using that bike ped bridge at all hours, which is, conveys the feeling of safety that people have in the community. And it gives an awesome level of accessibility to the Bay Trail, which is one of our community's most awesome assets that North Central is closer to accessing than a lot of neighborhoods. I know there's one thing I wanted to add is right on the border of North Central, across that bridge is a pretty large housing development that's been proposed. And as someone who hopes new residents might not use cars as much as existing residents, I'm really excited about what the future might hold for connectivity across 101 between North Shoreview and North Central. And I myself know about that bridge, and I use it multiple times a week to jog or bike, and along with my wife to picnic over at Coyote Point, and it feels a lot safer than the Peninsula 101 overpass. So I realize this is at the border of the study area, but a lot of folks from North Shoreview make their way into North Central via that ped bike bridge, and a lot of my friends who live in North Central commute over that bridge to offices like in Bridgepoint and Foster City via the Bay Trail. So just wanted to call out that really key infrastructure that we've got across 101 right there, and just call out that a lot of folks live right on the border of the study area and are really invested in seeing a lot of the problems that the residents of the study area are feeling firsthand. We're feeling it secondhand, and excited to see what comes out of the Complete Street Survey here. Thanks.
Thank you, Max. Okay, any more speakers? And I don't see anybody in person. Nobody on phone or remote. Okay, let's bring it back to the commission for final questions, comments. Commissioner.
No more comments. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, I have comments. Max has brought up the Foster City commuters. A lot of this is really tying together for me. I know that Foster City does not have a high school. So all of those high school age kids in Foster City are supposed to go to San Mateo, or they end up, some of them get transfers to other schools. But there are a lot of kids from Foster City, high school age, going to San Mateo High School. So looking at that, and then also looking at the 14% of the fatal and severe collisions from our previous agenda item are ages 16 and 17-year-old drivers. I think we really need to work on encouraging those high school kids to walk or bike or e-bike even, though some people don't like those things, to school. I don't know how we can do this as a community, as a city, how we can really encourage more kids to get to school, not in a car that they're driving themselves, but by bicycle. That connectivity to Foster City is really key. And also, of course, throughout the city of San Mateo too. So that's, that's my rant. I think that's it. More bus stops. The seniors need them, the disabled need them, the kids need them. We need to really work on citywide and also especially where, we have dense neighborhoods, getting better public transportation so people don't have to walk so far and don't have to figure out other ways to get around and call people with cars or whatever. I guess the last thing is handicap parking. How is that determined on a per block basis?
In residential areas, we have a on-street accessible parking space program in the North Central neighborhood that was offered free of charge following the implementation of the Humboldt and Poplar bike lanes. So that is the process is application, and then we have to go out and do a site survey. We are limited in where we're able to install accessible parking on street because it needs to be adjacent to an ADA compliant curb ramp. So typically that's going to be at a corner, not necessarily in front of someone's home. And those spaces are for general public use. So it gets a little bit tricky in terms of residential areas because we're not necessarily proactively putting in a specific number per corridor or block segment or something like that. But I know that we had, it's very late and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we had a number of requests for installation in North Central and we were able to install, I think most of the requests. There were some that we were unable to do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I just have a question or two. Trina and Lori brought up, we know the loss of 250 parking spots back a couple of years ago. And the city, I thought, came up with a pretty innovative plan. They were going to use the Martin Luther King Center. I seem to recall parking at the adult school. Is that still, how did the city resolve that? I remember the city was going to go out and secure parking and there would be a permitting process. And I remember the Martin Luther King Center and the San Mateo Adult School. So what's going on now?
We currently still offer parking, overnight permit parking at the King Center. Typically on a monthly basis, probably we have about a dozen permits that are issued.
And that can hold 50.
30, I think.
Is it 30?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not full.
Yeah, correct. So there is still capacity there. The permits are free of charge on a monthly basis. In terms of other locations like the adult school, we ran into significant issues in terms of concerns about liability and security and vehicles being moved by the time those entities needed the parking. Right. So we weren't able to secure other locations. But as part of the Complete Streets North Central plan, we'll be including programmatic efforts, including potential parking programs for consideration.
Right, okay, because this is not going away. And then I want to go back to a point Mike raised. He mentioned about vehicles parking in front of stores that are along the bike path. And what would, if you see something like that, what would one do? What would a bicyclist do? Does a bicyclist call LAS, our parking enforcement, and report this? Do you know if a vehicle's parked on a bike path currently? How does that work?
Suggestion would be to either call LAS directly and we can provide a phone number, or to call the San Mateo Police Department non-emergency number.
Right, okay, all righty. Okay, and in terms of comments, you heard my comments. I'm not going to restate them, but it bothers me, frankly, that a whole group of our residents are not included in the planning, and they have very unique and different life experiences. So that's all I'll say about that, but I'm hoping when we come back and look at this, that you've got input, you've sought out, you know how to get to people, that's not, and Kristen, you know how to get to people. And so we need to get them involved and hear from their point of view. Okay. Everyone, I'm going to close out this agenda item. Thank you, Christian, Sue Ellen. It's getting late. Thank you, everyone. You're welcome to stay for our final agenda item, and we do appreciate everybody's input. We're going to close up tonight's meeting with final reports and announcements. Anyone have any? Matt?
Just would like to remind the commission that Sue Ellen sent out an email about availability for April 9th. We had previously solicited April 16th in terms of a joint planning commission, sustainability infrastructure commission to hear about the draft TDM ordinance. We realized that that was not the best timing because it was going to be after we went to council on the 15th for a study session. So we'd like to get the commission's feedback before the council study session. So if you could please respond to that availability in terms of the 9th, that previously that date was not available to us from the planning commission, but it has become available. And so I think if we could accommodate a joint meeting that night, that would be ideal. It would be before the 15th. The only significant downside is that we do have our regularly scheduled Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission the next night on the 10th, so it would be 2 nights in a row. So if folks could let us know on that, then we can make plans accordingly.
Okay. All righty. Sue Ellen, anybody else? Reports, announcements? Is that it? Okay. Our next regular commission meeting will be Wednesday, April 10th, starting at 7 p.m. This meeting is now adjourned. Good night, everyone.